Chapter 31. After Han Qinggu vented for a while, she also knew that she had wrongly blamed Yuan Chuling. She looked at Yuan Chuling with an apologetic look in her eyes. Although Yuan Chuling's score was not as exaggerated as Tan Xiu's, but in this monthly test, Yuan Chuling also got 476 points. It must be known that this monthly test was very difficult. In the whole grade, there were only 27 people who got more than 550 points. Yuan Chuling's score of 476 points was already in the top 300 of the grade. In the whole class 10, there were only 5 people in the top 300 of the grade. Yuan Chuling, Tan Xiu didn't stay in the dormitory last night. Today he asked for leave. Do you know what he is busy with? Han Qinggu asked with concern. I don't know. Yuan Chuling was a day student. He didn't know that Tan Xiu ran away from his bed at night. Thinking of Tan Xiu's restaurant being smashed, his eyes couldn't help but flash a trace of panic. You are lying. You must know the reason. Hurry and tell teacher, is Tan Xiu in trouble? Keenly catching the change in Yuan Chuling's face, Han Qinggu nervously asked. Yuan Chuling, if Tan Xiu really is in trouble, please tell us. You also don't want Tan Xiu to have an accident at the critical moment of the college entrance examination, right? Clearly listening to Han Qinggu and Yuan Chuling's words, Cheng Yinnan's heart also jumped to her throat. Yuan Chuling originally had a psychological shadow about Tan Xiu's restaurant being smashed. At this time, seeing Han Qinggu and Cheng Yinnan's nervous faces, his heart also panicked. After hesitating for a moment, Yuan Chuling told him about Tan Xiu's restaurant being smashed. Suddenly hearing that Tan Xiu's restaurant was smashed, Han Qinggu and Cheng Yinnan were shocked. They pulled Yuan Chuling out of the classroom and asked Yuan Chuling to lead the way to Linjia restaurant. Half an hour later, Han Qingwu's car stopped at the roadside in front of the restaurant. Looking at the bustling scene in the restaurant, she couldn't help but be stunned. Yuan Chuling, are you sure you didn't bring us to the wrong place? Cheng Yinnan also felt that something was wrong. She asked suspiciously. Yes, when I came here 2 days ago, the entire hall was smashed to pieces, and the hall was also stained with blood. I also went in to vent my anger and beat up 2 people. Yuan Chuling was also surprised. The scene in front of him was completely beyond Yuan Chuling's imagination. It was reasonable to say that the restaurant would not be able to open for at least a few days after it was smashed to such a state. But now not only was Linjia restaurant operating normally, but its business was also very good. The restaurant's 3 walls and ceiling are all decorated with solid wood granular boards, which cost at least 200,000 yuan. The floor is Marco Polo tiles, and the area of 100 square meters is nearly 100,000 yuan. More than 30 sets of solid wood tables and chairs are estimated to cost 200,000 yuan, and the soft decoration also costs 50,000 to 60,000 yuan. And the business of this restaurant is very good. Not only are the 18 tables in the restaurant hall full, but there are at least 6 tables outside the restaurant waiting in line. Even if the net profit of each table is only 50 yuan, the restaurant's net profit every day is at least 20,000 yuan. When Yuan Chuling was still wondering why Linjia restaurant suddenly changed so much, Han Qingwu's voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Yuan Chuling, don't you think your lies are too inferior? If this restaurant is really Tan Xiu's family, will his days in school be so hard that he can't even pay the tuition fees? Just when Yuan Chuling was wondering why the homeroom teacher suddenly analyzed the restaurant's decoration and profit, Han Qingwu's voice suddenly became cold, and she scolded sternly. This. I don't know what's going on. What I told you before was the truth. Yuan Chuling said at a loss. Get out of the car and go back to school by yourself. If you are late for the evening self-study session, hand me a reflection letter of more than 1,000 words. Han Qingwu was too lazy to listen to Yuan Chuling's explanation, but she ordered coldly. I'll go down and see what's going on. Maybe the owner of this restaurant has changed. It was the first time that Yuan Chuling saw Han Qingwu angry. Under Han Qingwu's fierce gaze, Yuan Chuling scrambled out of the car and explained while trembling. But before Yuan Chuling could finish his words, Han Qingwu stepped on the accelerator, and the maroon Tuareg quickly merged into the traffic. It was not until the Tuareg disappeared that Yuan Chuling realized that his wallet and mobile phone were in the desk, and he didn't even have a penny on him. It will take at least an hour to walk from here to school. I will definitely be late for the evening self-study session. This reflection letter is definitely written. Yuan Chuling silently estimated the distance from the restaurant to school, and his face turned bitter. Hey Ling, it's you. I thought I was mistaken. Why are you standing outside? Come in and have a seat. Just as Yuan Chuling was wondering if he should go into the restaurant to see what was going on, a familiar voice rang in Yuan Chuling's ear. Yuan Chuling looked up and found that the person talking to him was Tan Xiu's mother, Su Lingyun. He immediately revealed an excited expression. He finally had money to pay for his journey back to school. Auntie, have you transferred the restaurant? Yuan Chuling looked up and down at Su Lingyun. He found that Su Lingyun's clothes had not changed at all from 2 days ago. A guess quickly emerged in his heart, and he asked with a face full of concern. No, this restaurant is still mine. It's just that Auntie renovated the restaurant. At the same time, Auntie came up with a few new seasonings, and the restaurant's business suddenly became booming. Hearing Yuan Chuling mention the restaurant, Su Lingyun's face showed a joyful smile. Hearing Su Lingyun's words, Yuan Chuling felt strange. He wanted to be curious about where the money for renovating the restaurant came from, but because he was not familiar with Su Lingyun, he was too embarrassed to ask. Auntie, Tan Xiu got 712 points in this monthly test, which is 79 points higher than the second place in the grade. You don't have to worry about his grades in the future. After a moment of silence, Yuan Chuling deliberately led the topic to Tan Xiu. He wanted to test whether Su Lingyun knew Tan Xiu's whereabouts. Yuan Chuling originally wanted to ask Tan Xiu's whereabouts directly, but he was afraid that Su Lingyun did not know that Tan Xiu had asked for leave. If he let Su Lingyun know that Tan Xiu had asked for leave, it would cause Su Lingyun to worry, so he had to ask Su Lingyun indirectly. Xiu really got the first place in the grade. Great, I knew he wouldn't lie to me. When Su Lingyun heard that Tan Xiu got the first place in the grade, although she was very happy, she was obviously not as excited as Yuan Chuling imagined. Remembering that before the monthly test results came out, Su Lingyun believed that Tan Xiu could get the first place in the grade, Yuan Chuling suddenly became silent again. However, from Su Lingyun's mouth, Yuan Chuling could almost determine that Su Lingyun did not know Tan Xiu's whereabouts. After chatting with Su Lingyun for a while, Yuan Chuling asked Su Lingyun for the fare to go back to school. When Yuan Chuling returned to school, he was surprised to find that Tan Xiu's seat was actually sitting with a bald head, and this bald head looked a bit familiar. Long Zhenglin, how come you came to our school? After staring at the bald head for a long time, Yuan Chuling spoke in a surprised voice. Fatty, you're not dead yet? I thought you committed suicide after that incident. After seriously staring at Yuan Chuling for a moment, Long Zhenglin affectionately greeted him. Hearing Long Zhenglin's words, Yuan Chuling's facial muscles fiercely twitched, and he snappily replied, You're not dead yet, how can I die before you? Star City could not be said to be big, but it was not small either. The Long family was a well-deserved giant in the Shuangqing province's restaurant business, with assets of tens of billions. The Yuan family was just a rookie in the real estate industry, and their qualifications were less than 1% of the Long family's. When it came to the family's heritage, the Long family threw the Yuan family 10 streets away. It was reasonable to say that the two families should not have any intersection, and Yuan Chuling and Long Zhenglin would not become close friends. However, a lot of things were completely dependent on fate. Yuan Chuling and Long Zhenglin didn't get to know each other because of the family behind them. They got to know each other because they coincidentally entered the same school and the same class. Although they had only been classmates for a short year, the like-minded Yuan Chuling and Long Zhenglin had forged a deep friendship, and the friendship between them also led to the family behind them to have a closer business relationship. Until 2 years ago, when Yuan Chuling's parents had a divorce, Yuan Chuling began to abandon himself to despair and entered a state of self-isolation. Only then did the two of them sever their relationship. However, the friendship between the two of them obviously did not fade with the passage of time. After not seeing each other for 2 years, not only did Yuan Chuling and Long Zhenglin not become strangers, they became even more intimate. I'm looking for Tanxiu. Do you know where Tanxiu went? After exchanging some conventional greetings, Long Zhenglin went straight to the point and asked Yuan Chuling, "You're looking for my boss? Why are you looking for him?" Hearing that Long Zhenglin had unexpectedly come to look for Tanxiu, Yuan Chuling was stunned. In his knowledge, these two people should not be from the same world. Tanxiu is your boss. Long Zhenglin's mouth twitched when he heard this. Thinking of how he had shamelessly pestered Tanxiu and asked Tanxiu to become his disciple, he suddenly felt a pain in the ass. Yes, his brain is smarter than mine, his grades are better than mine, and he is also more handsome than me. The most important thing is that he treats people warmly and sincerely, and knows how to take care of people. What's wrong with me recognizing him as my boss? Yuan Chuling did not know about the matter between Long Zhenglin and Tanxiu. He thought that Long Zhenglin felt that Tanxiu was not worthy to be his boss, so he could not help but patiently explain. You still haven't said why you're looking for my boss. After he finished speaking, Yuan Chuling found that Long Zhenglin was a bit absent-minded, so he couldn't help but urge him again. I'm looking for Tanxiu for help. I don't know if you have heard about the Walled Hill Village project. Our family is planning to transform into a tourism and catering business, and we're aiming for the Walled Hill Village project. But we never thought that several other families would also take a fancy to this project, so we decided to decide the winner in the casino. Long Zhenglin didn't have anything to hide from Yuan Chuling, so he narrated the details to Yuan Chuling. Wait a minute, why am I confused? You want my boss to help you with gambling, but the problem is that my boss is famous for being an obedient child. He never enters the casino, so it's impossible for him to have gambling skills. Just as Long Zhenglin's words faded, Yuan Chuling's eyes widened as he involuntarily exclaimed in surprise. Chapter 32. Good boy. Hearing Yuan Chuling's description of Tanxiu, Long Zhenglin's face revealed a strange expression. Would a good boy enter the game hall? Could a good boy make the game hall's boss lose his underwear? Wait a minute, what's with your expression? Could it be that what those bastards said was actually true? Clearly seeing the change in Long Zhenglin's expression, Yuan Chuling subconsciously cast his gaze in the direction of Su Xiangfei. Yuan Chuling had just stepped into the classroom this morning when he heard someone spreading a rumor, saying that Tanxiu went to the game hall last night after the self-study session and played all night. The source of the rumor was Su Xiangfei, Su Duanxin, and Tan Lichuan. Because it was a fact that Tanxiu didn't go to bed last night, everyone easily believed the rumor spread by Su Xiangfei and the other two. Everyone looked at Tanxiu with eyes full of contempt and disdain. Not only did his grades were bad, he even went all night to play slot machines. Wasn't this a broken pot? However, when Tanxiu's monthly test results came out, the direction of public opinion immediately changed. Everyone agreed that Su Xiangfei, Su Duanxin, and Tan Lichuan were deliberately creating rumors to discredit Tanxiu, because the three of them often went in and out of the game hall was a well-known matter, but everyone had never heard of Tanxiu entering the game hall. Moreover, entering the game hall wasn't a big deal. Most of the ordinary class students had entered the game hall, and there were many people who played games all night. So even if what Su Xiangfei and the others said was true, the students of class 10 didn't hate Tanxiu in the slightest. On the contrary, they felt that the distance between them and Tanxiu was closer, and not so far away. On the contrary, the actions of Su Xiangfei, Su Duanxin, and Tan Lichuan were very despicable. Whether it was spreading rumors or tattling behind their backs, they were not the actions of gentlemen, and were considered to be immoral. This was the power of scoring 712 points in the monthly test. This was the power of being the top student in the year. Su Xiangfei and the others obviously did not expect that not only did they fail to discredit Tanxiu and get Tanxiu punished, but they were also ostracized by their classmates. It was a typical case of going for wool and coming home shorn, suffering a double loss. Those bastards. Following Yuan Chuling's gaze, Long Zhenglin looked in the direction of Su Xiangfei's group, and a cold light flashed in his eyes. Yesterday, Su Xiangfei, Su Duanxin, and Tan Lichuan had been following behind Tan Xiao. And Long Zhenglin was naturally aware of it, because he was also following behind Tan Xiao. Moreover, he also heard the words of these three people disrespecting Tan Xiao. Long Zhenglin previously thought that these three people were completely passers-by, and that they were just jealous of Tan Xiao's rampage in the Health and Prosper Club. So they said those words. He never thought that these three people were actually classmates of Tan Xiao, which made him loathe these three people. Feeling the loathing in Long Zhenglin's eyes, Su Xiangfei and the others subconsciously lowered their heads, and their complexion became deathly pale. In fact, after Long Zhenglin had arrived at the classroom, Su Xiangfei and the others had turned into ostriches, and didn't even dare to breathe loudly, because they didn't want to be discovered by Long Zhenglin. They didn't expect that Long Zhenglin would finally notice their existence. Fatty, you've been long-winded with me for so long, but you still haven't told me Tan Xiao's whereabouts. After watching Su Xiangfei and the others for a moment, Long Zhenglin retracted his gaze and anxiously asked, "You ask me, but who do I ask?" At noon today, Boss threw a leave slip and ran away, saying that he had an urgent matter to deal with. Yuan Chuling, with a bitter face, recounted his previous encounter. This, after listening to Yuan Chuling's narration, Long Zhenglin was dumbfounded. "Fatty, if Tan Xiao comes back, you must inform me immediately. If Tan Xiao doesn't show up tomorrow morning, then my brother is dead for sure." Unable to find Tan Xiao in one middle school, Long Zhenglin hurriedly dropped a few words and left. In the classroom of Class 10, Yuan Chuling and Cheng Yinnan, the two people, were staring at each other. Their faces were full of doubt and shock. The shock that Tan Xiao brought to them these past 2 days was really too big. First, he broke out the first place in the monthly test, and then he unexpectedly became the god of gambling. If someone else told them that Tan Xiao knew gambling techniques, they would certainly sneer at it. But when Long Zhenglin told them these words, and even personally came to one middle school to ask Tan Xiao for help, they had no choice but to believe it. The moonlight was like a veil, and the shadow of a huge black mountain was cast on the earth. At the top of Walled Hill Village, a little starlight fell from the sky and enveloped Tan Xiao. Tan Xiao was bathed in the starlight, and every pore on his body expanded and opened up, crazily absorbing the starlight and refining it into his own celestial essence. This was the second time that Tan Xiao actively cultivated the heavenly art of cosmic genesis after his rebirth. The first time that Tan Xiao actively cultivated the heavenly art of cosmic genesis was because he inadvertently found that his body fit the conditions for cultivating the heavenly art of cosmic genesis. Moreover, he had been reading and reciting the heavenly art of cosmic genesis day and night in the immortal world. As a result, his body inadvertently and passively cultivated the heavenly art of cosmic genesis. Out of curiosity, he took the initiative to cultivate the heavenly art of cosmic genesis. However, the feeling at that time was not very wonderful. The pain of his body being torn apart made Tan Xiao not dare to actively cultivate the heavenly art of cosmic genesis for a long time. Now that he had most of the raw materials needed for the body refining liquid for the qi cultivating realm, Tan Xiao finally dared to actively cultivate the heavenly art of cosmic genesis again. As the starlight slowly entered Tan Xiao's body, the celestial essence in Tan Xiao's body began to increase at a speed visible to the naked eye. 1, 2, 3, 4. The first time that Tan Xiao actively cultivated the heavenly art of cosmic genesis, his body had only formed half a celestial essence. After a month of passive cultivation, Tan Xiao's half a celestial essence gradually became round and full, barely forming a complete celestial essence. Now that Tan Xiao actively cultivated the heavenly art of cosmic genesis for the second time, perhaps because he was sitting on top of a spiritual vein, the speed at which he absorbed the starlight was dozens of times faster than the first time he actively cultivated the heavenly art of cosmic genesis. At the same time, the celestial essence in his body was also dozens of times faster. In just 2 hours, the amount of celestial essence in Tan Xiao's body had increased from 1 to 4. However, when Tan Xiao's celestial essence reached 4, the speed at which Tan Xiao absorbed the starlight dropped sharply, The muscles on his face twitched fiercely, while his body started to sweat profusely, and a puddle of water started to form under his buttocks. The requirement of the heavenly art of cosmic genesis on the strength of the body was too high. Even though Tang Xiu had trained his body day and night for a month, and his body's strength had increased a lot, but before he went through the body refining liquid, Tang Xiu's body was still in the state of an ordinary person. The human body had a limit to what it could bear, and a limit to its endurance. Moreover, the dantian meridians, acupoints, blood vessels, and organs all needed to rest. It was impossible for them to operate without limits. When Tang Xiu had accumulated 4 celestial essences inside his body had already reached the limit that it could bear. The explosive power contained in these 4 celestial essences seemed to be able to blow up his body at any time, turning his body into powder. The severe pain made Tang Xiu unable to care about shocking the world, as he involuntarily looked up to the sky and screamed. Immediately, Tang Xiu began to roll on the ground, while banging his head against the rocks. For a time, the top of Walled Hill Village was filled with howling winds, sand and stones were flying everywhere, and the sky turned dark. Tang Xiu tossed and turned for most of the day, before he managed to vent a part of the power in his body. Immediately, a strong sense of hunger hit him, causing Tang Xiu to feel dizzy. At this moment, Tang Xiu even suspected that he would not have any problems swallowing a few cows. Hey, how come the turtle doves and hares are all gone? When Tang Xiu planned to eat the wild game that he had hunted during the day to satisfy his hunger, he found that only the venomous snake and the scorpion in his backpack were still there. The rest of the wild game unexpectedly disappeared, which made Tang Xiu dumbfounded. One must know that Tang Xiu had started cultivating at 1 a.m., and it was impossible for anyone to go up the mountain in the middle of the night. Moreover, those turtle doves and hares were tied up by Tang Xiu using a special method, so it was impossible for them to escape by themselves. Therefore, this matter was obviously strange. After a short period of horror, Tang Xiu quickly calmed down, while a touch of excitement flashed through his eyes. If it were an ordinary person, perhaps they would think that the mountain was haunted, and would be scared to the point of wetting themselves and crying as they went down the mountain. However, Tang Xiu was not an ordinary person, but a cultivator who had lived in the immortal world for tens of thousands of years. Moreover, he did not come to Walled Hill Village for sightseeing. This is really a case of wearing out iron shoes in fruitless search, only to find it by chance without even looking for it. Tang Xiu knew that the demonic beast that he had been painstakingly looking for had finally appeared. Moreover, the other party had even snatched the prey from his hands. After his soul was restored, Tang Xiu's senses were strengthened more than 10 times. After passively cultivating the heavenly art of cosmic genesis for a month, Tang Xiu's senses were once again strengthened. At this time, Tang Xiu's senses were nearly 100 times stronger than an ordinary person's, and nothing could escape Tang Xiu's eyes and ears. But when the prey beside Tang Xiu disappeared without a trace, and Tang Xiu didn't notice it in the slightest, there was only one explanation. The one who stole the prey was not an ordinary person or a wild beast, but a fierce beast with a cultivation base. Tang Xiu didn't immediately set out to look for the fierce beast, but picked up some dry firewood from the woods on the roadside, lit it up, and began to leisurely barbecue the game. During the tens of thousands of years in the immortal world, not only did Tang Xiu's cultivation reach the acme of perfection, but his talent and attainments in the fields of elixirs, array formations, refining tools, talismans, and other aspects were equally hard to catch up to. More importantly, Tang Xiu was also a gourmet. In order to satisfy his gluttonous desire, Tang Xiu didn't hesitate to spend 100 years to cultivate in the secular world. He traveled all over the world, leaving behind all kinds of legends in the secular world. Finally, he mastered the art of sculpting clouds and cutting the moon, reaching the pinnacle of perfection. 10 minutes later, the venomous snakes in Tang Xiu's hand that were skewered on the stick exuded a tempting aroma. Tang Xiu didn't rush to put them into his mouth, but skillfully took out seasoning salt, cumin powder, 13 spices, and some of his own special seasonings from his school bag, and sprinkled them on the snake meat. As the snakeskin opened up little by little, the white and tender snake meat slowly turned golden, and the aroma of the meat in the air became more intense. Suddenly, a whistling sound abruptly rang in Tan Xiu's ears, and at the same time, a fishy smell came into Tan Xiu's nose. Evil creature, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Tan Xiu seemed to have expected such a scene. He lay back and narrowly avoided the sneak attack from behind. At the same time, a pile of sparks flew from the soles of his feet and poured behind him in an overwhelming manner. Chapter 33. Almost at the same time that Tan Xiu's body fell backward, a thick rattan as thick as a bucket fiercely lashed in the direction of Tan Xiu. If Tan Xiu's body did not fall backward just now, he would definitely be hit by the rattan. Hiss! Hissed the rattan. Did not hit Tan Xiu, but its mouth issued a sharp and angry hissing sound. The thing that suddenly launched a sneak attack on Tan Xiu was impressively a huge python. The python's sneak attack did not hurt Tan Xiu, but its eyes were injured by the burning wood that Tan Xiu kicked up with the tip of his foot. As if it was angered by Tan Xiu, the python suddenly soared into the air and sprayed a scarlet mist from its mouth, covering everything within a radius of tens of meters. Its body was like an arrow that left the bow, directly shooting towards Tan Xiu. Even if he held his breath, Tan Xiu still felt dizzy. It turned out that this scarlet mist actually contained a highly toxic poison. It could not only enter the human body through breathing, but also penetrate deep into the human body through the skin. Tan Xiu was still an ordinary person. It was already very good for him to be able to foresee and take precautions, and to hold his breath in advance. With his current cultivation base, he simply could not control the opening and closing of the pores on his body. Like a donkey rolling on the ground to avoid the python's attack, Tan Xiu took out a triangular dagger from his bag and fiercely stabbed it towards the python. Although he once again avoided the python's attack, Tan Xiu's face became extremely ugly. After the strenuous exercise, although Tan Xiu's mouth and nose could still rely on his willpower to insist on not breathing, but the pores on his body opened sharply, causing the poisonous mist in his body to increase. I must finish this quickly, otherwise, I am afraid that I will die here today. After feeling the poison spreading in his body, Tan Xiu's eyes flashed a touch of coldness, and his mind instantly became clear. In the next moment, Tan Xiu's hand already had a handful of herbs. He carelessly stuffed the herbs into his mouth and rolled into the firewood. Enduring the pain from the burning firewood on the soles of his feet, Tan Xiu looked at the giant python with a burning desire to fight. Previously, Tan Xiu only thought about coming to Walled Hill Village to look for the fierce beasts, so he simply didn't spend any effort to estimate the danger of the fierce beasts. But the danger of this python in front of him was obviously beyond Tan Xiu's expectation, and he was caught off guard. Tan Xiu could only blame himself for being too used to the power and confidence he had in the immortal world for thousands of years, so much so that he had yet to fully adapt to his current identity as an ordinary person. Fortunately, in order to prevent himself from being poisoned while walking in the mountains, Tan Xiu picked some antidote herbs while climbing the mountain. Although they could not completely remove the poison in his body, they could temporarily suppress the spread of the poison in his body. Tan Xiu jumped into the fire not because he was masochistic, but because he had no other choice. The bonfire had an obvious repelling effect on the scarlet poisonous fog. There was almost no scarlet poisonous fog above and around the bonfire. For Tan Xiu, it was no different from an excellent shelter. Hiss! Hissed the black python apparently also discovered Tan Xiu's intention. It curled its tail and fiercely whipped Tan Xiu. Just when Tan Xiu jumped up to avoid the black python's whipping attack, a trace of cunning flashed in the black python's eyes. With a loud bang sound, the burning firewood suddenly fluttered all over the sky, and there was not a single piece of firewood left on the ground. It turned out that the black python's real target was not Tan Xiu, but the firewood on the ground. Evil creature, it seems that you have reached the psychic stage. I won't forgive you. Seeing that the black python unexpectedly had such wisdom, Tan Xiu's face couldn't help but flash with a trace of horror. At the same time, killing intent surged out from his body. Since Tan Xiu was able to hide in the bonfire, he would naturally guard against the black python from destroying the bonfire. With his rich combat experience, while Tan Xiao was dodging the black python, the tri-edged dagger in his hand nimbly spun and fiercely stabbed the black python's vital point. The pitiful black python was still immersed in the excitement of destroying the bonfire. Then a sharp pain suddenly came from its vital point, causing its body to suddenly stiffen. After Tan Xiao's attack was successful, he did not hesitate to pull out the tri-edged dagger, bringing out a mass of flesh and blood. Then he inserted it again and pulled it out again. After repeating this 3 times, the black python finally reacted from the sharp pain. It curled its tail and wanted to bind Tan Xiao. At this time, Tan Xiao had already created a fist-sized wound on the black python's vital point. Blood was gurgling out from the wound. In his previous life, he had already recited the heavenly art of cosmic genesis countless times. Practicing the heavenly art of cosmic genesis had already become an instinct of Tan Xiao's body. Naturally, Tan Xiao knew all the materials needed for the body-refining liquid to practice the heavenly art of cosmic genesis. The murderer's blood essence could be said to be the most essential part of the murderer. Tan Xiao was naturally willing to miss even a little bit. With lightning speed, he stabbed a fist-sized wound on the black python's vital point. Tan Xiao opened his mouth and fiercely bit the black python's wound. At the same time, Tan Xiao's hands fiercely hugged the black python's body to prevent it from throwing him off. The black python obviously did not expect that it might fail. It did not expect that the situation would be reversed so quickly. When it realized that it, which had a crushing advantage, had actually lost to an ant and was facing a life-threatening danger, it became anxious. Only to hear a loud bang sound, the black python's tail fiercely whipped on Tan Xiao's arm. The pain made Tan Xiao's facial muscles twitch fiercely. In fact, the black python's tail was originally aimed at Tan Xiao's head. However, at the critical moment, Tan Xiao stopped sucking and did not hesitate to tilt his head to the side. Only then did he escape the disaster. Evil creature, I don't believe that I can't take care of you today. Tang Xiao could clearly feel that one of his arms had been fractured by the black python just now, and only his other arm was still intact. Forcibly enduring the pain from his arm, Tan Xiao's eyes flashed a touch of malevolence. In the next moment, Tan Xiao bit the triangular dagger with his teeth and quickly inserted it into the black python's vital point. When the triangular dagger was completely submerged into the wound, Tan Xiao began to suck the black python's blood essence again. Under the severe pain, the black python rolled all over the ground. Its mouth also sprayed a thick scarlet poisonous mist. Its long tongue was hissing in the air. Its cold eyes made people feel cold. When the black python gathered strength again to whip Tan Xiao with its tail, Tan Xiao grinned, and then directly stirred the triangular dagger in the black python's body with his teeth. Under the stirring of the triangular dagger, the black python's strength, that it had accumulated with great difficulty, was instantly removed. Its attack was naturally resolved by Tan Xiao. After realizing that its tail could not cause an effective attack on Tan Xiao, the black python finally became flustered. It began to take Tan Xiao's body to hit the boulders or ancient trees on the mountain. Tan Xiao's eyes and ears were alert. Every time he could skillfully avoid the impact of the boulders and ancient trees, minimizing the damage to his body. In the process, Tan Xiao almost did not stop sucking the black python's blood essence. Under Tan Xiao's crazy sucking, the black python's blood essence was flowing away crazily, and its strength became less and less. Finally, the black python realized that its life had come to an end. It stopped struggling frantically, but its body bounced and shot straight in one direction. When Tan Xiao's body rose into the air, his face instantly became pale, and there was a loud bang in his mind. It turned out that this time the black python did not take Tan Xiao's body to hit the boulders or ancient trees. It actually fell straight down the mountain. When the black python realized that it could not do anything to Tan Xiao, and its life was in danger, it did not hesitate to choose to die with Tan Xiao. Am I going to perish together with this python today? Tang Xiao listened to the whistling sound of the wind and looked at the pitch-black ground under his body. A feeling of despair and unwillingness couldn't help but gush out from his heart. No, it wasn't easy for me to come to this world. It was difficult for me to see my mother. I must survive. In just a moment, Tang Xiu adjusted his state of mind, and a firm expression flashed in his eyes. In the next moment, Tan Xiu took out the trident dagger and madly slashed the black python's body. At this time, the black python's strength had been reduced to less than 10%. Under Tan Xiu's ravaging, it was very difficult for it to resist even if it wanted to. It could only let Tan Xiu leave one shocking mark after another on its body. However, Tan Xiu's face quickly showed a look of horror because the trident dagger could only stab the black python's 7 inches. There was no way to stab any other part of the black python's body. Only then did Tan Xiu know that if he did not stab the only weakness of the black python's 7 inches when it was unprepared, he would not be able to cause any damage to the black python today. Even his life was very likely to be lost in the hands of the black python. While Tan Xiu was absent-minded, the black python had already fallen more than 100 meters with Tan Xiu's body. At this time, Tan Xiu could already faintly see the houses at the foot of the mountain and the rugged and undulating rocks. I am just a mortal flesh fetus now. If I fall at this speed, I will definitely be smashed into meat paste. Seeing that his body was getting closer and closer to the ground, Tan Xiu's heart became more and more anxious. A pair of eyes like an eagle swept across the bottom of his body, looking for a chance to survive. However, when Tan Xiu looked far away, he found that there were only stones under his body. There were no trees or puddles at all. This made Tan Xiu almost desperate. Just when Tan Xiu thought he was going to die, a little rain suddenly fell on Tan Xiu's face, making him stunned. How could it rain on such a sunny day? Tan Xiu looked up at the sky and found that the sky was full of stars and the moonlight was bright. His eyes were full of doubts. Got it. When Tan Xiu found that it was not raindrops that dripped on his face, but blood essence flowing out of the black python's body, Tan Xiu's eyes lit up. He finally found a chance to survive. Chapter 34. 3 o'clock in the morning was the darkest time before dawn, and it was also the time when the farmers in the mountains slept the most soundly. A loud bang, as if a muffled thunder, resounded at the foot of Walled Hill Village, waking up the sleeping villagers. The sleepy villagers mumbled something in their mouths before they turned over and continued to sleep. Some people listened attentively for a moment and found that there was no other sound apart from the frightening owls, so they also slowly fell asleep. Impressively, a man and a snake suddenly fell from the sky and smashed to the ground. This man and snake were impressively Tan Xiu and the black python, who had previously fought at the top of Walled Hill Village. At this time, the black python had completely lost its life. Its body curled into a ball, and in the center of the ball, Tan Xiu was grimacing in pain with a face full of lingering fear. At the last moment of life and death, Tan Xiu found that the black python's breath was very weak and didn't have any strength to resist. He rolled his eyes and didn't hesitate to wrap the black python's body around his body. In just a few breaths of time, Tan Xiu wrapped himself tightly like a rice dumpling, completely not exposing any part of his body. The black python was the first to discover Tan Xiu's intention. It subconsciously wanted to use its rock-hard flesh and huge strength to crush Tan Xiu into meat paste. But just as the black python had this thought, its body had already crashed to the ground. Under the huge impact, the black python, whose life was hanging by a thread, directly died. It was no longer able to injure Tan Xiu in the slightest. Even its rock-hard flesh was lacerated by the huge impact. After a long time, Tan Xiu untied the black python's tail that was wrapped around his body and staggered to get up from the ground. Seeing the badly mangled black python, Tan Xiu couldn't help but secretly rejoice. If he hadn't thought of a way to escape when his life was hanging by a thread, he reckoned that he would have turned into meat paste like the black python. Moreover, it might be even more miserable. After all, the black python's skin and flesh were as hard as a boulder, while his own body was made of flesh and blood. He could not withstand a single blow, although Tan Xiu used the body of the black python to save his life at the critical moment. Under the huge impact, his body still felt like it was falling apart, and there were a few more bumps on his head. It took a long time for Tan Xiu to catch his breath. Then he took out a triangular dagger and peeled off the skin of the black python. Aside from using this black python's skin to concoct medicine, I can make at least 3 sets of clothes. One for mother, one for myself, and the last one for Fatty. Tang Xiu was struggling to peel off the snakeskin as his mind started calculating. The internal organs of the black giant python are the main ingredient for medicine, but this black giant python's internal organs are a little big, and I don't need that much to concoct the body-tempering liquid. Therefore, I can consider brewing the rest of it into medicinal wine and sell it. At the same time, it can also help mother nurse her body. Part of the black python's tendons are used to refine the body-refining liquid, and the other part is used to refine weapons. Although the meat of the black giant python is a great tonic, it is also a great poison. Obviously, it is not suitable for ordinary people to eat, so I can only enjoy it myself. It took Tan Xiu a full 3 hours to finish dissecting the materials of the black giant python. After standing up and stretching, Tan Xiu was dumbfounded. This black giant python had cultivated for many years. Its body was as thick as a bucket, and its length was more than 20 meters. Therefore, when it was dissected, the materials of its body were piled up like a mountain, almost close to Tan Xiu's height. It's troublesome without a storage ring. Tan Xiu smiled bitterly and looked around. After thinking that it should be impossible for anyone to arrive at this area so early, he turned back and climbed up to the top of the mountain. When he was barbecuing the game, Tan Xiu put his bag aside, mobile phone, wallet, and other things in it. Half an hour later, Tan Xiu successfully climbed to the top of the mountain and found his bag in a mess. The rare herbs in the bag had been destroyed in the fight between Tan Xiu and the black giant python, and some special emergency items had also been destroyed. To Tan Xiu's relief, when he took out the mobile phone he bought last night from the bag, he found that the mobile phone's screen was still stubbornly lit. If the mobile phone was broken, Tan Xiu wanted to transport the materials of the black giant python back to the main city, and it was unknown how many people would be alarmed. Banzhou, find me a good sealed truck, and ask Dingzi to help rent a freezer. After the phone was dialed, Tan Xiu ordered in a deep voice. Banzhou and Dingzi were the small punks who had followed Zeta Persei to make trouble in the Linjia restaurant a few days ago. After being ruthlessly cleaned up by Tan Xiu, they now followed Tan Xiu's lead and obeyed Tan Xiu's orders. It turned out that after Tan Xiu had ruthlessly cleaned up Zeta Persei and the others in the restaurant that day, Tan Xiu did not easily let the 7 people go. Instead, he did something to them, in case they did not keep their promise, and directly ran away regardless of the renovation of the restaurant. After Zeta Persei and the others left the restaurant, they indeed turned a deaf ear to Tan Xiu's words. Zeta Persei was like this, the green-haired punks were like this, and so were Banzhou and Dingzi. Naturally, the others were no exception. After being tortured by Tan Xiu, they could not wait to hide as far away from Tan Xiu as possible, because the impression Tan Xiu had left on them was too deep. He was ruthless, indifferent, cruel, ruthless, and incomparably powerful, making them not even have the strength to resist. Zeta Persei and the others felt that as long as they found a place to hide, it would be impossible for Tan Xiu to find them. As long as they no longer went to find trouble with the Linjia restaurant, everything would be fine for them. Afraid that Tan Xiu would follow the Shangguan real estate and find them, Blackie and the others did not even dare to ask the Shangguan real estate for the remaining half of the reward. After most of the day had passed, when they learned that Tan Xiu had only strolled at the entrance of the restaurant for a while, and then left, seemingly unable to do anything to them, Zeta Persei and the others were secretly delighted, feeling that their decision was correct. After that night, Zeta Persei and the others regretted their decision so much that their faces turned green. Almost at the same time, Zeta Persei and the others began to feel severe pain all over their bodies. Whether they went to the hospital or found an orthopedic doctor, they could not find any problems with their bodies at all, and there was no way to relieve the pain. After Zeta Persei and the others asked each other about their situation, they were sure of one thing, that the severe pain in their bodies was related to Tan Xiu, and only Tan Xiu could help them relieve the pain. Then, the 7 of them did not care that their injuries had not healed, nor did they care that it was already late at night. They all gathered in front of the entrance of the Linjia restaurant. Naturally, Tan Xiao could not wait for them in the middle of the night at the Linjia restaurant. It was not until the next morning that Tan Xiao slowly walked to the restaurant. At this time, Zeta Persei and the others had already been tortured by the severe pain for the whole night. After seeing Tan Xiao, Zeta Persei and the others bowed their heads and kowtowed, as if they had seen their own father, begging Tan Xiao to help them relieve the pain. Moreover, they continuously reflected on themselves and promised him that they would help. Their attitude was as sincere as it could be. Tan Xiao smiled and did not make things difficult for them. He directly helped them relieve the pain, and then left after saying, "Renovate the restaurant well," leaving Zeta Persei and the others standing at the entrance of the restaurant, looking at each other in dismay. This time, Zeta Persei and the others naturally did not dare to turn a deaf ear to Tan Xiao's words, nor did they dare to be lazy or play any tricks. In order to make Tan Xiao satisfied, and thus completely relieve the pain on their bodies, Zeta Persei and the others could be said to have racked their brains and put in a lot of effort when renovating the restaurant. In just 2 days, Zeta Persei and the others had completely renovated the Linjia restaurant. Zeta Persei and the others had paid a huge sum of nearly 600,000 yuan for this. Not only did they use all the money that Shangguan Real Estate had paid them to deal with Tan Xiao, they also used all the savings they had on them to pay for it. This was because the pain brought about by the restriction was really too unbearable. It was not only a devastation on the body, but also a torture on the soul. They did not want to suffer such pain again in their lifetime. Tan Xiao was obviously very satisfied with the high efficiency and high quality of Zeta Persei and the others. Therefore, he simply removed the restriction on Banzhou, Dingzi, and the others, and even treated their injuries. Of course, Zeta Persei and the green-haired scoundrel were an exception. Although Tan Xiao removed the restriction on their bodies, he was too lazy to treat their injuries. For Tan Xiao, it was already their good fortune that he didn't take their lives. Naturally, they didn't expect Tan Xiao to treat their injuries. As the saying goes, no discord, no concord. After this confrontation, Zeta Persei and the green-haired scoundrel were in awe of Tan Xiao. They didn't dare to provoke Tan Xiao anymore. Banzhou Dingzi and the others were shocked by Tan Xiao. They could see that Tan Xiao was the kind of person who could clearly distinguish between gratitude and grudges. Therefore, not only were they not afraid of Tan Xiao, but instead shamelessly pestered Tan Xiao, begging Tan Xiao to teach them 1 or 2 moves. Naturally, Tan Xiao was too lazy to pay attention to Banzhou, Dingzi and the others. But he also didn't deliberately alienate them, because Tan Xiao knew that in this world, there would never be a lack of small characters like Banzhou and Dingzi. Most of the time, they were inconspicuous, but at the critical moment, they would erupt with power that was even more terrifying than the big shots. Before Tan Xiao had accumulated enough power, Tan Xiao didn't mind using this power for his own use. Banzhou's movements were very fast. Even if it was 6 a.m. in the morning, he still drove a big truck to the place designated by Tan Xiao at the foot of Walled Hill Village within half an hour. At the same time as Banzhou, there were also 3 other people who arrived at Walled Hill Village. They were the 3 people who had gone with Banzhou to cause trouble at Linjia restaurant. "Boss, Dingzi is looking for a suitable warehouse, so he didn't come. You said that the fewer people who know about this matter, the better it would be. Therefore, I only called the 3 of them over. If you need us to do anything, just tell us." After seeing Tan Xiao, Banzhou quickly took a step forward and reported with an excited expression on his face. Banzhou and his group had been pestering Tan Xiao for several days, but Tan Xiao had always been indifferent to them. This was the first time that Tan Xiao had asked them to help him with something. This meant that Tan Xiao at least didn't hate them anymore, so Banzhou and his group were naturally very happy. Chapter 35. When Banzhou and the other 3 people saw the mountain of snake meat and the pile of snakeskin on the ground, they couldn't help but reveal an aghast expression on their faces. Boss, you didn't kill the evil dragon in the Walled Hill Star Lake, right?" Ban's Ho glanced at the battered and exhausted Tan Xiao as he asked with a stutter, "Evil dragon? What's going on?" Tan Xiao originally wanted to scold Ban's Ho for talking too much, but he found that Ban's Ho seemed to be very familiar with Walled Hill Village. So Tan Xiao swallowed back the words that were about to come out of his mouth. Tan Xiao really wanted to know more about Walled Hill Village. From last night's contact with the villagers at the foot of Walled Hill Village, he could tell that these Walled Hill Village's natives were obviously very wary of outsiders. Thus, it was very difficult for Tan Xiao to get any useful information from their mouths. I came from Walled Hill Village. I heard from Grandpa that there was an evil dragon hiding in the Walled Hill Star Lake. Every full moon night, it would drill out of the Walled Hill Star Lake and steal the livestock raised by the villagers in the mountain. Over time, the people in Walled Hill Village simply didn't dare to raise livestock, because no matter how much they raised, they would only be helping the evil dragon feed them. In order to avoid being injured by the evil dragon, almost every household in the mountain would hang a red lantern in front of their door. Moreover, it must be lit every night. The hunters also didn't dare to go hunting in the mountain, fearing that they would accidentally be swallowed by the evil dragon. But speaking about it, it's also strange. There hasn't been any news about the evil dragon for almost 20 years. Everyone thought that the evil dragon had died, or moved to another place. I never thought that it would appear again. Moreover, it would even die in your hands. Because of his excitement, Ban's Ho intermittently talked about all the information he knew about the Black Python. Ban's Ho himself didn't know whether these rumors were true or false, because Tan Xiao could tell that some of them were obviously fabricated by the villagers. There's been no movement for nearly 20 years. Was he in seclusion to break through his bottleneck, or was he in a weakened state because of his injuries? Suddenly, Tan Xiao's eyes flashed with excitement. If the Black Python had been in a weakened state for the past 20 years because of its injuries, then it meant that there was another fierce beast hiding in the vicinity of Walled Hill Village. Then he would have the materials needed to cultivate the heavenly art of cosmic genesis's second-layer cultivation technique, Star's tyrannical body refining liquid. Half an hour later, all the snake meat on the ground had been moved onto the truck. Almost at the same time, Ban's Ho also received a call from Dingzi. It turned out that the freezer had been rented. "Boss, you rented the freezer to store the snake meat, right? It's just that there's so much snake meat. You can't eat it all by yourself. Even if you supply it to the Linjia restaurant, there will still be a lot of surplus. Why don't you just resell the snake meat? Not only can you generate income, but you can also avoid the rental fees." Halfway through the journey, Ban's Ho muttered, "All the snake meat is highly toxic. I'm using it for another purpose, so it can't be eaten." Tan Xiao stared at Ban's Ho for a moment and said in a deep voice. Hearing Tan Xiao's explanation, Ban's Ho couldn't help but sweat. He realized that he had said something wrong and hurriedly apologized. Tan Xiao knew that Ban's Ho had good intentions, so he didn't say anything. If he wasn't afraid that Ban's Ho would steal and eat the snake meat, he would be too lazy to explain. After Ban's Ho said something wrong, he didn't dare to utter a word along the way. When the others saw that Tan Xiao seemed to be thinking about something, they also didn't dare to make any noise, so as to avoid provoking Tan Xiao's anger. Along the way, without any words, the vehicle soon arrived at the freezer in the Old River Street district, where Dingzi was waiting for Tan Xiao and his group. "You guys aren't bad by nature. In the future, don't do things like extortion and harming people. If you're willing, you can go work in the restaurant. You don't need to stay in the restaurant all day. Just help out once in a while. For example, physical labor like purchasing goods, as well as word-of-mouth publicity and so on." When Ban's Ho Dingzi and his group had spent tremendous effort to move all the snake meat into the freezer, Tan Xiao muttered to himself. After a few days of observation and understanding, Tan Xiao found that although Ban's Ho, Dingzi, and his group used to mix with Zeta Persei, they were not willing to live that kind of life. It was only because they didn't have any special skills, and they were always ridiculed by their family and friends. Therefore, they wanted to make some noise, so that their family and friends would look at them with new eyes. Unexpectedly, Ban's Ho Dingzi and their group had overreached themselves. After they followed Zeta Persei, Not only did they fail to make their family and friends look at them with new eyes, but their family and friends became increasingly cold and disgusted with them. So they simply smashed the pot, so that things developed in a vicious circle and became out of control. Thank you for taking us in, boss. We will certainly live up to your expectations. Rest assured, boss. In the future, we'll take care of all the hard and tiring work in the restaurant. We guarantee that Andy won't be tired. If some blind person dares to harass the restaurant, we'll make him go in vertically and come out horizontally. Upon hearing Tan Xiu's words, Banzhou, Dingzi, and the others, who were just sitting on the ground with tired faces and gasping for breath, instantly became excited as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Although the business of the Linjia restaurant was not good before, they had seen the popularity of the Linjia restaurant in the past few days. To say the least, even if the business of the Linjia restaurant was bleak, it didn't matter to them, because they had an ulterior motive. They just wanted to take the opportunity of working in the restaurant to get close to Tan Xiu and build a good relationship with Tan Xiu. If Tan Xiu was happy and could give them some pointers, they would be rich. Not to mention that the restaurant's business was so booming. Based on their understanding of Su Lingyun, as long as they got Su Lingyun's approval, it would be absolutely impossible for Su Lingyun to be mean to them. In this way, they would be able to reveal their work to others and gain face in front of their family and friends. There's some money in here. You can take it as compensation for renovating the restaurant and helping us with the work this time. Seeing the excited faces of Banzhou, Dingzi, and the others, Tan Xiu naturally knew what they were thinking in their hearts. He didn't care about it, and with a smile, he fished out a bank card and handed it over to Banzhou and Dingzi. Also, I want you all beaten up from top to bottom. If you go to the restaurant like this, you will only scare away the customers. Staring at Banzhou and the others for a moment, Tan Xiu added. The reason why Tan Xiu gave the money to Banzhou, Dingzi, and the others was because he had accidentally overheard the conversation between Banzhou, Dingzi, and the others in a remote place. Although Dingzi had rented the warehouse, he had only paid a deposit of more than 1,000 yuan. He hadn't paid the entire amount. The reason was very simple. Dingzi had no money, he really had no money. All these years, Banzhou and Dingzi's life had always been one where they would drink today, and get drunk tomorrow, and worry tomorrow and worry tomorrow. They were the typical members of the Moonshine clan. Previously, when renovating the restaurant, Zeta Persei, Banzhou, Dingzi, and the others had pooled together nearly 600,000 yuan, among which 100,000 yuan was the advance payment given to them by Shangguan Real Estate, and 200,000 yuan was seized from Shangguan Real Estate by Zeta Persei and the others through threats and promises. As for the remaining 200,000 yuan, it was pooled together by Zeta Persei, Banzhou, Dingzi, and the others by contributing all their savings. After renovating the restaurant, Banzhou, Dingzi, and the others were completely emptied. Therefore, when Tan Xiu asked them to do something, they were also strapped for cash. Tan Xiu couldn't do such a thing. In fact, when he was in the Immortal world, Tan Xiu had always been extravagant with his subordinates. He had never been stingy when it came to rewards. After throwing the bank card to Banzhou and the others, Tan Xiu went to the school on foot. Although Tan Xiu had already collected all the materials needed to refine the body refining liquid, he couldn't wait to immediately go into closed-door cultivation. However, thinking that once he went into closed-door cultivation, he would most likely not come out for 10 days to half a month, he had no choice but to go to the school and ask for a long vacation. What Tan Xiu didn't know was that when he went to the school, Banzhou, Dingzi, and the others were all shocked by the amount of money in the bank card. Previously, when Tan Xiu threw the bank card to them, although Banzhou and the others tactfully refused, but when they saw Tan Xiu's insistence, they were afraid that if they continued to refuse, they would anger Tan Xiu. Therefore, they reluctantly accepted the bank card. In the eyes of Banzhou and the others, even if there was money in the bank card given by Tan Xiu, it wouldn't be too much. However, Since Ban's Ho and the others had no money to spend, they couldn't restrain their curiosity and looked for an ATM to check the amount in the bank card. When they saw the huge amount of 6 digits in the bank card, they almost suspected that there was something wrong with their eyes. 273,000 yuan. I'm not mistaken, right? How could the boss be so rich? Could it be that the boss is an invisible rich man, and what we see is only on the surface? Like I said, the boss is so skillful, how could he be so poor? If he casually went outside to pick up a job, it would be enough for him to live a carefree life. Ban's Ho, Dingzi, and the others stared at each other and began to discuss with each other. They seemed to have been completely awed by Tang Xiu's formidable martial prowess. Their imaginations went wild as they thought of all kinds of possibilities. The only thing they didn't expect was that Tang Xiu had just received the money from the game hall, and that it had only been in Tang Xiu's hands for a night. Ban's Ho, Dingzi, among us, you two are the oldest and most knowledgeable. So, how should we deal with this money? Should we divide it like this? Or should we return it to the boss? After discussing for a long time, everyone couldn't come up with a conclusion. Finally, everyone threw this difficult problem to Ban's Ho and Dingzi. It's definitely not appropriate to return it to the boss. According to the boss's character, since he has given it to us, we should never think about returning it. It's not appropriate for us to divide it like this. I suggest that we save this money first and use it for the boss's business, except for the necessary expenses. Ban's Ho pondered for a moment and spoke out his own suggestion. I also think so. The boss has made it very clear that he hates our previous behavior. That is to say, we can't do things like stealing and extorting in the future. So we have to work seriously. As long as we get the boss's approval, we can learn a few moves from the boss. Dingzi echoed from the side. However, he was obviously a little absent-minded, and all his thoughts were on how to learn martial arts from Tang Xiu. Chapter 36. After leaving the freezer, Tang Xiu somewhat regretted his extravagant behavior. In total, Tang Xiu won more than 290,000 yuan in the Health and Prosper Club. He took out 10,000 yuan in cash and put it in his school bag as pocket money, and deposited the remaining 280,000 yuan in his bank card. Later, he used his bank card to buy the mobile phone, but when he bought the necessities for going up the mountain, Tang Xiu used cash. In other words, of the 290,000 yuan that Tang Xiu won from the Health and Prosper Club, apart from the 7,000 yuan he spent on the mobile phone and the 10,000 yuan he reserved, he threw the rest of the money to Ban's Ho, Dingzi, and the others. The earth is not the immortal world, and I am not the immortal world tycoon with infinite wealth. In the future, I have to carefully calculate and live within my income. Touching his shriveled school bag, Tang Xiu suddenly missed the feeling of filling his school bag with money the night before yesterday. When Tang Xiu arrived at school, the morning self-study session had already ended. Throwing his school bag into the classroom, Tang Xiu went to Han Qingwu's office. What? You want to ask for leave? Moreover, you want to ask for leave for 20 days? Do you know what you are talking about? Han Qingwu was about to criticize Tang Xiu's behavior of asking for leave without asking for permission yesterday. But she never thought that before she could speak, Tang Xiu would beat her to it. Hearing this, Han Qingwu couldn't help but become furious. Her voice suddenly increased by dozens of decibels, almost penetrating the entire office building. Miss Han, I am very clear about what I am talking about. Now I just want to find a quiet place to review and wait for the arrival of the college entrance exam, instead of spending my time in a noisy classroom. Facing Han Qingwu's questioning, Tang Xiu was as calm as water as he softly replied. Han Qingwu obviously didn't expect that Tang Xiu would answer her like this. For a moment, she couldn't help but stare blankly. Tang Xiu, I know you have good grades. Because of this, you have to guard against arrogance and rashness. You can't fall at the critical moment. Otherwise, you will regret it for the rest of your life. After being silent for a long while, Han Qingwu persuaded him with a sincere and heartfelt tone. You're still young, Tang Xiu. There are many things you can't see clearly, and you can't think through them thoroughly. But teacher is an experienced person, so I'm sure she won't harm you. Hearing Han Qingwu's words, Tan Xiu had a strange feeling in his heart. If he counted his years in the immortal world, he would be an old monster. But Han Qingwu actually said that he was young. Who was younger than who? However, Tang Xiu could feel that Han Qingwu was advising him for his own good. If it was Hu Qiusheng, he would have definitely let him toss and turn. Tang Xiu, is it because the discipline in the class is too bad that it affects your revision? Or are the students in class bullying you and making you feel wronged? Seeing that Tan Xiu was silent, Han Qingwu seemed to have thought of something. She asked with a worried face, "Miss Han, I have made up my mind. I came here today just to inform you, not to discuss it with you. Whether you agree or not, I will ask for leave. If you are not willing, I will ask for leave from the principal. If the principal is not willing, I will ask for a transfer. I hope you can understand my difficulties." Tan Xiu was afraid that if he continued to talk to Han Qingwu, he wouldn't be able to help but change her mind. So he left after saying those words. Han Qingwu was obviously shocked by Tan Xiu's words. She didn't expect that Tan Xiu's tone would suddenly become so cold. His attitude was also so strong, giving her a strange feeling. So much so that even after Tan Xiu left the office for a long time, Han Qingwu was still stunned and didn't react. On the other side, Tan Xiu had just entered the classroom and met Yuan Chuling, who had just returned from the toilet. "Boss, you're finally here. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Why did you disappear? You made everyone worry about your safety." Yuan Chuling tightly grabbed Tan Xiu's arm, his face full of affection. "Fatty, don't be so mushy. Those who know about our relationship know that we're hardcore. But those who don't will think that you're gay." Tan Xiu unobtrusively shook off Yuan Chuling's palm and teased him with a smile. "Fuck, boss, how can you insult me like this? But if you're willing, I can change my sexual orientation for you." Yuan Chuling first screamed and roared, and then he smiled wickedly. "Fuck off." Tan Xiu roared angrily, then grabbed his bag on the desk and walked away. "Class is about to start. Why are you walking out of the classroom? Are you going to ask for leave again?" Seeing Tan Xiu's action, Yuan Chuling was dumbfounded. "I'm disgusted by you. Can't I stay away from you?" Tan Xiu waved at Yuan Chuling, but his feet didn't stop walking in the direction of the classroom door. Yuan Chuling's face twitched fiercely when he heard that. His eyes also showed a confused look. He was a little unsure whether Tan Xiu was telling the truth or joking with him. In the next moment, Yuan Chuling smiled because Tan Xiu, who walked to the classroom door, took out a basketball from his bag and threw it at him. "Fatty, this is a birthday gift for you. I hope you like it." Tan Xiu came to school today to ask for leave. More importantly, he suddenly remembered that today was Yuan Chuling's birthday. As his only friend in school, Tan Xiu felt that he had to do something. So he couldn't help but be extravagant this time. He bought a basketball that Yuan Chuling liked, but was reluctant to put it down and gave it to Yuan Chuling. When Han Qingwu finally recovered from the shock of Tan Xiu's words, she quickly ran to the classroom. Unexpectedly, she still couldn't catch up to Tan Xiu's pace. For a moment, her face became extremely ugly, and her eyes became misty. "Bastard, son of a bitch, you don't know how to appreciate my kindness. If you don't get good grades in the college entrance exam, you deserve it." In a deserted corner, Han Qingwu fiercely stomped her feet and scolded while gnashing her teeth. What Han Qingwu didn't realize was that her current behavior was not the behavior a teacher should have toward a student, but more like a little girl in a fit of pique. After leaving school, Tan Xiu was in a dilemma. He could cultivate the heavenly art of cosmic genesis. He also had the body-tempering liquid to strengthen his body and physical strength. But where should he go to refine the body-tempering liquid? And where should he take it? Refining the body-tempering liquid would create a big disturbance, and Tan Xiu didn't want to be misunderstood as a terrorist and arrested. After taking the body-tempering liquid, he would enter into a closed-door training state. This closed-door training state could be as short as a few days, or as long as 10 days to half a month, and it was definitely not good to be discovered by others in this state. Tan Xiu had a headache as he found out that these problems, which were not a problem in the immortal world, had unexpectedly become a big problem on Earth. If I had my own manor in the suburbs, then all these problems wouldn't be a problem. Tan Xiu's mind subconsciously flashed the walled hill village's spiritual vein. But when he recalled the several rich second generations he met yesterday evening on the hill, his eyes couldn't help but flash with a touch of worry. Tan Xiu was so engrossed in his thoughts that he didn't even notice an off-road vehicle speeding through a red light. Suddenly, an ear-piercing braking sound resounded in his ears, causing Tan Xiu to wake up from his contemplation. Then, Tan Xiu was horrified to find that a black Land Rover had already approached his body. If the other party hadn't stepped on the brake in time, he reckoned that he would have been hit by the other party. You're fucking courting death. Don't you open your eyes when you walk? You deserve to die. You want to blackmail me? Do you believe that I won't directly run over you? I'll make sure that you won't have the life to spend your money. I'm really fucking unlucky. If it wasn't for this father's quick reaction, I would have definitely seen blood today. I would have definitely lost the gamble. Fortunately, I looked at the almanac before I went out and maintained a high vigilant state. When Tan Xiu heard the emergency brake sound, there was a loud bang in his mind. Then, the painful memories of the car accident more than a year ago suddenly emerged in his mind, causing his body to stagger. His facial muscles were also distorted, and beads of sweat the size of soybeans gushed out from his forehead, so he didn't hear the Land Rover driver's words at all. Boy, don't pretend. I have installed a driving recorder, and I can immediately arrange for you to go to the best hospital for a physical examination. You want to blackmail me? No way. The Land Rover driver was frightened by the symptoms shown by Tan Xiu. His words were obviously not as confident as before. Instead, he seemed to be a bit fierce in appearance but weak in heart. At this time it was rush hour. When the car accident happened, the Land Rover was instantly overwhelmed by the crowd, and the traffic was also stuck. When the onlookers saw Tan Xiu sweating all over and his face twitching, they subconsciously thought that Tan Xiu was seriously hit. Just at this time, the Land Rover driver's arrogant words reached the ears of the crowd, and then the crowd instantly became angry. So what if he's rich? Nowadays, the rich second generation is like this. Everyone take a photo and post it on the internet. Let everyone search for this person's identity. Look at him, he's less than 20 years old, but he's driving a car worth millions. Who knows where this car came from? Maybe his parents were corrupted and bribed. Hearing the words of the onlookers, the Land Rover driver was dumbfounded. The Land Rover driver was used to bullying the weak and using his power to oppress others. So much so that he subconsciously acted arrogantly in front of Tan Xiu. But he forgot that he was in a public place, and the onlookers were basically the same as Tan Xiu. They were the disadvantaged group in society, and the disadvantaged group generally sympathized with the weak. If the Land Rover driver was honest, he would have just paid the money and left. But he just had to be arrogant and domineering, which aroused even more public indignation. Zhang Yongjin, when will you change your bad temper? Isn't the other party just asking for money? How much he wants? Just give him. If you delay the walled hill village's matter, no matter how much money you have, it won't be enough to compensate. When the Land Rover driver was in an awkward dilemma, a hearty voice suddenly sounded from behind him. It made the Land Rover driver feel as if he had caught a life-saving straw as his expression loosened up. It's you! It's you! Upon hearing the three words Walled Hill Village, Tang Xiu finally sobered up from that painful memory. He then saw the Land Rover's driver and the youth in a flowery shirt behind him. He couldn't help but frown as he involuntarily cried out in alarm. Almost at the same time when Tan Xiu recognized the Land Rover driver and the young man in the flowery shirt, the other party also recognized Tan Xiu's identity. Chapter 37. It turned out that the Land Rover's driver and the youth in the checkered shirt were the two rich second generations who had crossed paths with Tan Xiu at Walled Hill Village yesterday evening. Tan Xiu faintly remembered that the youth in the checkered shirt was called Schwerenfei, a typical idiot with a lot of money, and was used to smashing people with money. The Land Rover's driver was the muscular man, Zhang Yongjin, who was the kind of person who was brave but not astute, and was used to bullying people with his power. Brat, how much money do you want? Just name a number. As long as it's not too much, we'll accept it. But I warn you, don't go too far. Otherwise you won't get a penny, and you might even be arrested and locked up. Shuirenfei squinted at Tan Xiao as he spoke with a face full of disdain. Zhang Yongjin originally wanted to speak, but under the dozens of pairs of eyes staring at him, he didn't dare to utter a word, and just let Shuirenfei deal with Tan Xiao. You guys can leave, I'm fine. Although Tan Xiao didn't like Shuirenfei's tone and attitude, but he wasn't the kind of person who would make trouble out of nothing. So he shook his head and said indifferently. Tan Xiao's answer was obviously beyond the expectation of Shuirenfei and Zhang Yongjin. Even the surrounding onlookers thought that there was a problem with their ears. The young man was obviously sweating from the collision a moment ago, and the painful expression on his face didn't seem to be an act. How come the other party was willing to pay money, yet he let the other party off? Brat, you want to play dirty with us? Let us off for the time being, and wait for us to leave before you call the police and say that we caused a hit and run? After a moment of silence, an eccentric voice suddenly resounded in the crowd. It was a young man in a suit who stood behind Shuirenfei. Upon hearing the words of the young man in a suit, Shuirenfei's face revealed a look of sudden realization, and the onlookers also let out an "oh" sound. Obviously, everyone thought that the young man in a suit had guessed Tan Xiao's true intention. Brat, when we were on the mountain, I already knew that you're not a good thing. But I didn't expect that you're actually so bad. Believe it or not, I'll cut you up. When the muscular man Zhang Yongjin heard this, his eyes suddenly widened. He extended his hand and was about to grab Tan Xiao's collar as he berated him. Tan Xiao was almost hit by the car because he was distracted. Now that he was sober, he naturally wouldn't be caught. A cold light flashed in Tan Xiao's eyes when he saw Zhang Yongjin's palm, that was as large as a cattail leaf fan. And then he took a step back imperceptibly and successfully avoided Zhang Yongjin's palm. Kid, you're really trying to blackmail me. After Zhang Yongjin grabbed nothing, he was stunned for a moment, and then he roared with excitement on his face. Because Tan Xiao's dodging movements were too agile, completely not the performance of an injured person, and when Tan Xiao stepped back just now, his body that was hidden by the car was completely revealed, and there were no signs of injury on the surface. Kid, you actually dared to blackmail me, I won't forgive you. Zhang Yongjin was a little guilty when he wasn't sure if he had hit Tan Xiao. Now that he confirmed that he didn't hit Tan Xiao, he instantly became angry. At the same time he berated Tan Xiao, his whole body pounced towards Tan Xiao. Seeing Zhang Yongjin's agitated look, Shuirenfei and Hu Wanjun couldn't help but shake their heads at the same time. Shuirenfei and Hu Wanjun were very clear about Zhang Yongjin's character. He would seek revenge for the smallest grievance, and would not suffer the slightest loss. Just now, Zhang Yongjin was criticized and cursed by the onlookers because of Tan Xiao. Now that he knew that he was wronged, even if Tan Xiao didn't die, he would still lose a layer of skin. Hu Wanjun raised his hand to look at his watch, and a hint of anxiety flashed across his face. Hoodlum, do you think this kid is trying to blackmail you? He shouldn't be trying to blackmail you, right? Although this kid looks poor, but he seems to be very principled and doesn't care about money. If he was trying to blackmail you, then he would have directly asked for money and not let us go. Shuirenfei hesitated for a moment before he shook his head. My mouth is cheap. I was angry at that kid's arrogant appearance on the hill yesterday, so I couldn't help but deliberately provoke him. Under Shuirenfei's inquiring eyes, Hu Wanjun explained with a guilty conscience. You're smart, but you're muddle-headed. The Walled Hill Village's project is so important, but you have to be angry at a poor kid. Is it worth it? Shuirenfei was still wondering why Hu Wanjun would suddenly say such words when the matter could obviously be settled. But after listening to Hu Wanjun's explanation, his eyes turned black, and he almost fell to the ground. If we were late, then you'd be waiting to be cleaned up by the big sister. Shuirenfei rolled his eyes at Hu Wanjun, and then turned around to get into his car. Fuck. Don't go. If you go, then what about this place? Hu Wanjun was dumbfounded when he saw Shuirenfei get into his car. I'll go to the hotel first. You stay here and help that big guy clean up his ass. I hope he doesn't play too hard. If he really plays with someone, then you can only consider yourself unlucky. Shuirenfei smiled and then started his Wrangler. In the next moment, the smile on Schwerenfei's face froze, and his mouth opened so wide that a salted duck egg could be stuffed inside. Hoodlum, what's wrong? Hu Wanjun asked while following Schwerenfei's line of sight. Then he felt as if someone was strangling his neck. Not only did his eyes almost pop out, but his throat also issued a series of meaningless sounds. Under the stunned gaze of Schwerenfei and Hu Wanjun, Zhang Yongjin, who was 1.9 meters tall and looked like an iron tower, was actually subdued by Tan Xiao, who was only about 1.7 meters tall. At this time, Zhang Yongjin's arm was caught by Tan Xiao. Zhang Yongjin was kneeling on the ground in a very humiliating posture, unable to move at all. Zhang Yongjin's face was flushed, but he couldn't do anything to Tan Xiao. You said that you're a bitch. You almost hit me with your car. I wanted to let you go, but you insisted on entangling with me. Aren't you refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit? Tan Xiao kicked Zhang Yongjin's butt and snapped. After drinking a stomach full of python blood, Tan Xiao had no place to vent his strength. Suddenly, there was such a big guy who took the initiative to knock on the door. Tan Xiao was also happy to clean up the other party. Brat, that doesn't count. Let me go if you have the guts. If you dare to let me go, I'll definitely make you look good. Even though Tang Xiao had restrained both of his hands, Zhang Yongjin still refused to admit defeat as he shouted loudly. Tang Xiao looked at Hu Wanjun provocatively and ridiculed him mercilessly. Big guy, the legendary simple brain and strong limbs is referring to you, right? I've finally subdued you with great difficulty. Tell me, why should I let you go? Just obediently kneel for me and apologize to me. I'll naturally let you go after you admit your mistake. Otherwise, you'll have to kneel here for me for a day. Kid, while I am not really angry, quickly let me go. Otherwise, it will be too late even if you want to let me go. Zhang Yongjin was so angry at Tan Xiao's words that he almost couldn't catch his breath. And then he ordered angrily. Big guy, it seems that you are still seriously ill. If that is the case, then I might as well wake you up. Seeing that Zhang Yongjin was still so arrogant at this time, Tan Xiao, who originally didn't like Zhang Yongjin's character, sneered and then pressed Zhang Yongjin's hand down. Zhang Yongjin lowered his head in humiliation. Zhang Yongjin was about to curse, only to hear a muffled bang sound. Zhang Yongjin's head had an intimate contact with the ground, and Zhang Yongjin's cursing turned into a painful groan. Kid, you are dead. You are definitely dead. After Zhang Yongjin groaned for a while, he couldn't help but threaten loudly. Is that so? In that case, I want to see who is going to die first. After being threatened by Zhang Yongjin again and again, Tan Xiao's anger also rose. He sneered and then pressed Zhang Yongjin's head without hesitation. Take this. Stop. Seeing that Zhang Yongjin's head was about to hit the ground again in humiliation, two shouts suddenly sounded behind Tan Xiao. At the same time, two strong winds also blew toward Tan Xiao's cheeks. At the critical moment, Hu Wanjun had to order his bodyguards to save Zhang Yongjin. After all, Zhang Yongjin fought with Tan Xiao because of Hu Wanjun's provocation. Now that Zhang Yongjin suffered a loss, once Zhang Yongjin realized what was going on, Hu Wanjun would definitely not be able to bear the consequences. Therefore, the only thing Hu Wanjun could do now was to try to save Zhang Yongjin as much as possible, and let Zhang Yongjin suffer less. In order to let Zhang Yongjin vent his anger, Hu Wanjun even ordered Tan Xiao's two arms to be broken. Although Zhang Yongjin seemed to be simple-minded and had well-developed limbs, Hu Wanjun knew that Zhang Yongjin was not really stupid. It was just that he was too lazy to use his brain most of the time. Once he really started to use his brain, he was definitely smarter than anyone else. The reason why Zhang Yongjin was too lazy to use his brain was that Zhang Yongjin's family strength was too strong. When a person's strength was strong enough, all conspiracies and tricks could be crushed. He naturally didn't need to use his brain. Zhang Yongjin belonged to this kind of person. Although Zhang Yongjin usually called Schwerenfei and Hu Wanjun brothers, and the three of them often hung out together and played together. But both Schwerenfei and Hu Wanjun were very clear that when it came to family heritage and family accumulation, their families were less than 1/10 of the Zhang family. Seeing that Tan Xiao was about to be subdued by Hu Wanjuan's 2 bodyguards, Hu Wanjuan's face couldn't help but show a cruel smile. Although Hu Wanjun didn't know how Zhang Yongjin was subdued by Tan Xiao, he was full of confidence in his 2 bodyguards. It must be known that these 2 bodyguards were not ordinary people, but retired soldiers with more than 10 years of combat experience. Their grappling and fighting skills were superb. Hu Wanjun had witnessed the scene of these 2 people knocking down more than a dozen ordinary gangsters in just a few minutes, so he was not worried that the 2 bodyguards could not complete their task. Chapter 38. Tang Xiu's attention seemed to be completely focused on Zhang Yongjin's body. He didn't notice the arrival of the 2 suited big men behind him. Even when the 2 suited big men's attacks were about to fall on Tang Xiu's body, he didn't make any move to evade or counterattack. Country bumpkin, don't think that you can be arrogant in front of us with brute force. The world is big. Hu Wanjun snorted coldly, then turned around and got in the car. In Hu Wanjuan's view, no matter how powerful Tan Xiao was, he was dead this time. It was just that Hu Wanjuan's feet were still in the air, and he had not yet gotten in the car. He heard 2 muffled bangs, and then felt his car shake violently. Fuck! When Hu Wanjun figured out what happened, he couldn't help but curse. Because the scene of Tan Xiao's arms being broken by his 2 bodyguards, in Hu Wanjuan's imagination did not happen. Instead, the 2 bodyguards were kicked away by Tan Xiao. If the 2 bodyguards fell somewhere else, Hu Wanjun would be shocked at most, but he would not feel distressed. What made Hu Wanjuan's heart bleed was that his 2 bodyguards actually fell on his off-road vehicle, like a human pyramid, directly smashing the front cover of his car. I don't know if the car's engine was damaged. If the engine is damaged, I will suffer a great loss. Hu Wanjun glanced at the completely dented front cover, and the muscles on his face twitched. In the past, Hu Wanjun always felt that it was very cool to have 2 bodyguards who were as burly and powerful as polar bears. But now he wished that the 2 bodyguards were as light as a swallow. While Hu Wanjun was distressed about his car, his 2 bodyguards rolled out of the car and rushed toward Tan Xiao again. This time, the faces of the 2 bodyguards were no longer filled with contempt and indifference. Their faces were filled with solemn expressions, and there was even a hint of shame and anger on their faces. As retired soldiers, although their combat power was much weaker than their peak and couldn't compare to active soldiers, they felt that it was easy for them to deal with ordinary people with their combat power, let alone a skinny high school student. What the 2 bodyguards didn't expect was that they didn't even know how the other party attacked, and they were sent flying by the other party. This was definitely a huge insult to the 2 bodyguards, and at the same time, it was also a deep lesson. I have already let you off once. If you continue to help the evildoer and fail to distinguish right from wrong, I don't mind giving you a deep lesson. Seeing that the 2 bodyguards had returned, Tan Xiao's eyes turned cold and he snapped. When the 2 bodyguards heard this, they could not help but exchange glances. Brat, we were careless just now, so you succeeded in your sneak attack. Do you really think you're that powerful? Bastard, you want to settle things peacefully after plotting against us? Dream on. I originally wanted to just cripple your arms, but you've embarrassed us so much. Maybe you'll have to suffer more. The 2 bodyguards sneered. They ignored Tan Xiao's indifferent gaze and brazenly attacked Tan Xiao. Tan Xiao couldn't help but sigh when he saw this. Because he heard from his mother that his father was an honorable soldier. This made Tan Xiao particularly yearn for the profession of a soldier. Therefore, Tan Xiao was an out-and-out military fan. Not only did he like to watch all the TV shows, movies, and documentaries about soldiers, but he also wouldn't let go of any news and information related to the military. Tan Xiao even dug out all the versions of military boxing from an old book stall, and persevered in practicing for several years. This was why Tan Xiao only glanced at the 2 bodyguards and determined that they were veterans. He did not kill the 2 bodyguards. However, when the 2 bodyguards attacked Tan Xiao again, Tan Xiao naturally would not have mercy on them. In Tan Xiao's opinion, when a soldier had been reduced to a pure thug and was unable to distinguish right from wrong, he was no longer worthy of being a soldier. Just when the two bodyguards thought that Tang Xiu wouldn't be able to escape after they got serious, and could only obediently wait to be captured, they fell into the same trap again. Before the two bodyguards could react to what was going on, they heard a few cautious sounds, and then their bodies fell limply to the ground. It was not until a few breaths had passed, and there was a burst of severe pain in their legs that they realized that the cracking sound just now was the sound of their legs breaking. For a moment, the two bodyguards completely forgot to scream. They looked at Tan Xiu in horror, unable to say a word, and endless regret surged in their hearts. Thinking of Tan Xiu's kind reminder just now, and then thinking of the arrogant words they said when they thought of Tan Xiu's reminder as a timid compromise, the two bodyguards only felt a burning pain on their faces. They wanted to find a hole to hide in. The two bodyguards' hearts were set off a storm, and the group of people who were watching the show were also stunned and speechless for a long time. The most exaggerated reactions were Hu Wanjun, Shuarenfei, and Zhang Yongjin. The three of them were very clear about the combat effectiveness of the two bodyguards, so they were full of courage from the beginning to the end. They did not worry at all that they would be at a disadvantage in a conflict. Even when Zhang Yongjin was at an absolute disadvantage, he was still calm, and did not have the slightest intention of bowing down to Tan Xiu. But when the two bodyguards, whom they regarded as their biggest reliance, were crippled by Tan Xiu, they really panicked. After the two bodyguards were crippled, the scene fell into a dead silence. Zhang Yongjin was still suppressed by Tan Xiu with his hands pressed on the top of his head, maintaining a humiliating posture. Shuarenfei was sitting in his wrangler, and did not start the car for a long time. Hu Wanjun had one foot in the car, and the other foot was still on the ground. He did not get in the car, nor did he get out. At this moment, Hu Wanjun really wanted to slap himself in the face. He had never hated his mouth. He knew that if he hadn't been so talkative, this matter would have been settled long ago, and it wouldn't have developed to such a terrible state. Big guy, why don't you say anything? You continue to clamor for me. When everyone was dumbfounded and completely immersed in the shock brought by Tan Xiu's powerful combat effectiveness, Tan Xiu snorted coldly and pressed Zhang Yongjin's head to the ground again. Even if Zhang Yongjin had a one-track mind, he was a little scared in his heart. The young man behind him not only had outstanding skills, but also acted in a bold and unconstrained way, making people difficult to figure out, and even a little unscrupulous. Zhang Yongjin suspected that if he continued to be stubborn with the other party, it was very likely that he would suffer a big loss, so his mouth squirmed for a long time, but he did not say a complete sentence. Just when Zhang Yongjin was hesitating whether he should bow down to Tan Xiu and temporarily brush off Tan Xiu, and then look for an opportunity to take revenge in the future, a loud and clear bugle sound suddenly sounded in his ears, causing his ears to faintly hurt, and at the same time startled him. Under Zhang Yongjin's angry gaze, Tan Xiu first looked around in a daze, and then slowly opened his bag and pulled out a brand new mobile phone from inside. I heard your voice, but I really don't know how to gamble. What? In addition to 1 million, you also promised me a condition? Okay, I'll come over right away. At the beginning, when Tan Xiu answered the phone, he was a little impatient, but when he heard the conditions on the other end of the phone, he instantly became excited. The one who called Tan Xiu was impressively Long Zhenglin, who had previously met with Tan Xiu at the Health and Prosper Club. Long Zhenglin got Tan Xiu's phone number from Yuan Chuling. Long Zhenglin had repeatedly exhorted Yuan Chuling to make Yuan Chuling inform him as soon as Tan Xiu returned to school. Yuan Chuling had always kept this matter in mind, but Yuan Chuling didn't think that Tan Xiu's arrival and departure would be so abrupt that he didn't even have the time to inform Long Zhenglin before Tan Xiu disappeared again. In desperation, Yuan Chuling could only give Tan Xiu's phone number to Long Zhenglin, which could be considered as doing his best in this matter. After Long Zhenglin got Tan Xiu's phone number, he naturally couldn't help but call Tan Xiu for help. Because the gambling game was about to begin, the other party's gambling expert had already arrived at the scene, but the Long family hadn't been able to find a famous gambling expert, which made them very passive. In a situation where there was no other way, Long Jingyu could only choose to believe Long Zhenglin and agreed to let Tan Xiao give it a try. Today you're lucky. If next time you still don't distinguish right from wrong and frame others, I don't mind giving you a profound lesson. After hanging up the phone, Tan Xiao remembered the urging from the other end of the phone. After dropping these words, he turned around and left, until Tang Xiao's figure disappeared. Only then did Zhang Yongjin confirm that he had finally escaped the calamity. His body instantly collapsed to the ground as he gasped for breath heavily. Yongjin, I'm sorry. I was impulsive just now. I shouldn't have encouraged you to deal with that country bumpkin. When Zhang Yongjin was still sitting on the ground to catch his breath, Hu Wanjun first ran to his side and apologized to him with a face full of apprehension. Zhang Yongjin quietly stared at Hu Wanjun for a moment. After a long while, he smiled bitterly and said, Old Hu, we've been together for so long. I still don't know what you're thinking. Of course, you added fuel to the fire in this matter. But more of the reason is that I can't stand that son of a bitch. Ouch, it hurts. Zhang Yongjin's words were only halfway through when he felt a sharp pain coming from his two wrists. When Zhang Yongjin saw the almost black bruises on his wrists, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. His face also showed a look of fear. Schwerenfei, go to the trunk of my car and get a bottle of wine out. I'll give Yongjin a massage. Hearing Zhang Yongjin's words, Hu Wanjuan's hanging heart finally fell to the ground. The next moment, he didn't hesitate to grab Zhang Yongjin's wrists and carefully rubbed the bruises. Chapter 39. 10 minutes later, Tan Xiao's figure appeared in front of the Long's dining hall's entrance. Long Jingyu and Long Zhenglin were already waiting for Tan Xiao at the entrance. After seeing Tan Xiao, Long Zhenglin took a few steps forward and tightly grasped Tan Xiao's hands as he said with an excited expression, Eldest brother, whether we can take down Walled Hill Village today or not, it's all up to you. Tan Xiao smiled but didn't speak. Instead, he looked at Long Jingyu. Long Jingyu was also quietly sizing up Tan Xiao as their gazes collided in midair. My name is Long Jingyu, Zhenglin's elder brother. Thank you for taking care of Zhenglin. Also, I'll leave everything to Mr. Tang today. Seeing that Tan Xiao wasn't anxious to exchange greetings with his younger brother, but rather noticed his presence first, Long Jingyu secretly nodded in his heart. It could be considered as his initial recognition of Tan Xiao, as he stretched out his right hand towards Tan Xiao. Hearing Long Jingyu address him as Mr., a strange feeling welled up inside Tan Xiao's heart, but he still stretched out his hand and shook hands with Long Jingyu. Mr. Long, to tell you the truth, my observation and calculation ability are stronger than ordinary people. But I don't understand gambling techniques. I don't even understand a lot of the gambling rules. Therefore, I can only try my best today. I don't dare to guarantee that I can win, so I hope you can understand. Tan Xiao stared at Long Jingyu for a moment before he said with a smile. When he said those words, Tan Xiao was a bit guilty, and even worried that Long Jingyu would directly kick him out. Because Long Zhenglin had clearly stated on the phone that Walled Hill Village was very important to the Long family. The Long family must take down Walled Hill Village, but he couldn't give any guarantee to the other party. The reason why Tan Xiao agreed to help was admittedly because of the generous reward factor. But what really tempted him was the development rights of Walled Hill Village. Ever since he had discovered the spiritual vein in Walled Hill Village, Tan Xiao had been worrying about how he could justifiably take the spiritual vein as his own. But he never thought that Long Zhenglin would take the initiative to look for him. This was simply like someone delivering a pillow while he was dozing off. Tan Xiao naturally couldn't refuse. However, be it in his past life or this life, Tang Xiao had never relied on gambling to earn money, so he didn't have any confidence in his gambling skills. This made him confess to Jingyu Long, lest he would be blamed by Jingyu Long and Jingyu brothers if he were to fail miserably and lose gambling. What Tan Xiao didn't know was that his frankness had greatly improved Long Jingyu's impression of him. Long Jingyu's confidence, which had fallen into the abyss, seemed to have recovered. You're too modest, Mr. Tang. The casino is full of turbulence and unpredictable changes. No one dares to pat their chest and guarantee that they'll definitely win. Long Jingyu smiled as he looked at Tang Xiu, with eyes full of appreciation. Several people were chatting at the entrance when they suddenly heard the ear-piercing sound of a car braking. Then, several figures hurriedly got off the car and walked straight towards the entrance. After seeing these figures clearly, Tan Xiu's face was filled with astonishment, because these people were impressively Zhang Yongjin, Hu Wanjun, and Schwerenfei, who had just had a conflict with him. Almost at the same time when Tan Xiu saw the figures of Zhang Yongjin's trio, Zhang Yongjin, who was walking in the front, also saw Tan Xiu. The moment he saw Tan Xiu, Zhang Yongjin suddenly stopped his footsteps, and his body uncontrollably retreated backward. The pitiful Schwerenfei and Hu Wanjun were following behind Zhang Yongjin. Their line of sight was blocked by Zhang Yongjin, and they couldn't see Tang Xiu's figure at all. When Zhang Yongjin suddenly stopped and retreated, they simply couldn't stop their bodies. Only two muffled sounds were heard, and Schwerenfei and Hu Wanjun bumped into Zhang Yongjin's body. Zhang Yongjin's body, which was like an iron tower, did not shake at all, but Schwerenfei and Hu Wanjun were knocked to the ground, and they cried out in pain. Why are you here? Don't mess around." Zhang Yongjin ignored the embarrassment of his two partners, but looked at Tan Xiu with a panicked face and stuttered. The psychological shadow that Tan Xiu left on Zhang Yongjin was too big. In his life, no one had ever made him kneel. Tan Xiu made him kneel. In this life, no one had ever made him kowtow, but Tan Xiu made him kowtow. What made Zhang Yongjin feel wronged and helpless was that after being beaten up so badly by Tan Xiu, he didn't even know Tan Xiu's name, let alone Tan Xiu's life experience. Originally, Zhang Yongjin wanted to slowly inquire about Tan Xiu's identity, and then slowly retaliate against Tan Xiu. It was just that Zhang Yongjin never dreamed that Tan Xiu would appear in front of him so quickly. Zhang Yongjin, who was completely unprepared, naturally panicked. "Brother Tang, what's going on?" When Long Jingyu saw Zhang Yongjin's trio coming, he originally wanted to hide to the side, but he was afraid that leaving Tan Xiu behind would not be good, so he had to bite the bullet and stand in place. Long Jingyu originally thought that after Zhang Yongjin's trio saw him, they would definitely mock and ridicule him, making him embarrassed. He didn't think that Zhang Yongjin's attention would be directly attracted by Tan Xiu, and he also behaved in such a manner that Long Jingyu was naturally surprised. Regarding Zhang Yongjin's identity, Long Jingyu was very clear. Everyone in the circle knew that Zhang Yongjin was a famous devil incarnate. Such a person, even if he was unreasonable, he would still be stubborn, and if he was in the right, he would be even more unforgiving. Such a person was actually afraid of Tan Xiu, which made Long Jingyu curious about Tan Xiu's identity, and at the same time, his confidence in Tan Xiu doubled, and his way of addressing Tan Xiu also unconsciously changed. "It's nothing, maybe he recognized the wrong person." Tan Xiu gently swept a glance at Zhang Yongjin, and just when Zhang Yongjin thought that Tan Xiu would speak about his embarrassing matter, Tan Xiu shook his head and withdrew his gaze. At this moment, Schwerenfei and Hu Wanjun also saw Tan Xiu, and at the same time, they also saw the Long Jingyu and Long Zhenglin brothers. Seeing Tan Xiu standing together with the Long Jingyu and Long Zhenglin brothers, their faces couldn't help but flash a look of surprise, and then their hearts tightened. After all, they had confronted Tan Xiu twice, and both confrontations ended in their defeat. This was not something to be proud of, and they were afraid that Tang Xiu would speak about their embarrassing matter, which would make them a joke in the circle. What made the three people relieved at the same time was that Tan Xiu didn't speak about their embarrassing matter, and even pretended not to know them, which made them secretly rejoice. But at the same time, they were a little angry at Tan Xiu for looking down on them. They looked at Tan Xiu with a complicated expression, and then the three people hurriedly stepped into the hall and disappeared around the corner. "Recognized the wrong person?" Hearing Tan Xiu's answer, Long Jingyu's face was full of astonishment. He wanted to question him, but the words that were at the tip of his mouth were swallowed back. "Big brother, the gambling will start soon, let's go upstairs." Long Zhenglin looked at the wall clock in the hall and urged with an anxious expression. The Long's dining hall was located in the most prosperous commercial street in Star City. It had a height of 49 floors, and its shape resembled two golden dragons. In the middle there was a spherical presidential suite, implying two dragons playing with a pearl. The Long's dining hall had become a landmark in the center of Star City, due to its magnificent appearance, and at the same time, it had also cast its commercial legend. The Shuangqing province's businessmen and celebrities were proud to be able to stay in the presidential suite. Over time, the presidential suite of the Long's dining hall had been hyped to a sky-high price. At this time, two people were sitting in the presidential suite of the Long's dining hall. One of them was a young woman in her 30s. She was wearing a cheongsam that revealed her graceful figure, but the sunglasses on her fair and delicate face made her look a bit cold and mysterious. The other one was an old man in his 60s. The old man was wearing a white Chinese tunic suit. He had a serious square face and his eyes were deep. He was not angry, but he was playing with two walnuts. Grandmaster Jia, we'll have to trouble you today. As long as you can help us take down Walled Hill Village, you will be the biggest shareholder of prosperous Nevernight City. The young woman lit up a cigarette and spoke in an indifferent tone. Miss Zhang, rest assured, with this old man taking action, there is no longer any suspense in this gambling house. In the Shuangqing province, no one would dare to clamor with this old man in the casino. The middle-aged man nodded as an extremely conceited smile appeared on his face. Zhang Deqin slightly frowned upon hearing his words, but she quickly stretched it out. Zhang Deqin didn't like that kind of boastful person, but thinking about Jia Ruidao's gambling skills, as well as his prestige in the Shuangqing province, she swallowed back the words that were about to come out of her mouth. Ever since Zhang Deqin released the news that Jia Ruidao would help her compete with the Long's dining hall in the casino, almost no gamblers dared to go to the Long family to apply for a job. This already proved how high Jia Ruidao's prestige in the circle was. I naturally admire Grandmaster Jia's gambling skills, otherwise, I wouldn't have asked Grandmaster Jia to help me. But it's better to be safe than sorry. It's better to be safe than sorry. We should always be vigilant. After being silent for a moment, Zhang Deqin said faintly. Hearing Zhang Deqin's determination to win Walled Hill Village, the expression on Jia Ruidao's face finally turned a lot more solemn. Just when Jia Ruidao adjusted his expression and wanted to say a few words of assurance to Zhang Deqin, the door of the room was suddenly pushed open as Zhang Yongjin, Hu Wanjun and Shuerenfei, three people, came in one after another. The few of you are too troublesome. Usually you're late, but today you're late. Do you think that I can rest assured in handing over Walled Hill Village to you? The moment she saw Zhang Yongjin's group of three, the previously calm and composed Zhang Deqin instantly turned into a tigress as she fiercely roared at them. Big sis, we were in a hurry and almost got into a car accident, so we were delayed for a bit. Under Zhang Deqin's sharp gaze, Zhang Yongjin was like a primary school student who had made a mistake as he bowed his head and apologized. Shuerenfei and Hu Wanjun, who were standing behind Zhang Yongjin, didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Hearing that Zhang Yongjin almost got into a car accident, Zhang Deqin stood up from her chair and strode towards Zhang Yongjin. After circling around him twice, she asked with a nervous expression, Yongjin, tell Big Sis what happened. Is your body all right? At this time, Zhang Deqin didn't have the imposing manner of a strong woman from a moment ago. She had transformed into an ordinary woman full of motherly love. Chapter 40. Zhang Yongjin really wanted to tell Zhang Deqin that he was bullied, but after his complexion changed for a long time, he still didn't say it. Because this matter was too shameful, he really couldn't say it. Zhang Yongjin didn't want to rely on his sister's strength to solve the problem, but he wanted to take revenge and wash away his shame. Sister, it's nothing. I was driving too fast and almost hit someone. I suddenly braked and hit my head on the glass. Zhang Yongjin said with a flushed face. You're lying. What's the matter with the bruises on your hands? What's the matter with the dust on your knees? Did you fight with someone and you don't dare to say it? Seeing Zhang Yongjin's evasive gaze, Zhang Deqin's eyes turned cold and she snapped. I Although Zhang Yongjin was tall and strong, but he had an unusual fear towards his sister. This fear had been deeply imprinted in his bones, and he tried his best, but was unable to get rid of it. Just when Zhang Yongjin was ready to confess, Long Jingyu, Long Zhenglin, and Tan Xiu pushed the door and entered. Seeing Long Jingyu and his group coming, Zhang Deqin returned to her seat and restored her elegant appearance. Zhang Yongjin was lucky enough to escape a disaster. Chief Long, you brought us here and then ignored us. Is this the hospitality of your Long's dining hall? Zhang Deqin didn't wait for Long Jingyu to open his mouth and took the initiative to speak. Chief Zhang is too serious. Today, apart from you, the Long's dining hall also has more important guests. This Long naturally can't stay in the room to accompany you. Long Jingyu smiled and said carelessly. Moreover, our Long's dining hall service has always been top-notch. No matter what Chief Zhang needs, as long as you press the call bell on the table, the waiter will be the first to satisfy you. Compared to Zhang Deqin's aggressiveness, Long Jingyu's words and actions revealed a noble demeanor, making people feel as if they were bathed in the spring breeze and ashamed of their inferiority. Zhang Deqin obviously didn't expect that Long Jingyu would give tit for tat. She subconsciously wanted to curse, but recalling Long Jingyu's unparalleled eloquence, she didn't dare to continue bickering with Long Jingyu. Instead, her eyes fell on Tan Xiu. But after glancing at Tan Xiu, Zhang Deqin didn't want to look at Tan Xiu a second time. This was because Tan Xiu's attire was too shabby. He wore a checkered shirt that could be found anywhere on the street, a pair of jeans that had been washed white, and canvas shoes that almost revealed his big toes. From head to toe, everything he wore cost no more than 100 yuan. Zhang Deqin had been pampered since she was a child, and was used to a life of luxury. She firmly believed that it was difficult for a poor family to have a noble son, so she had a natural sense of superiority and disdain for those who were born poor. Chief Long, may I know who the honored guest you are talking about is? Can you introduce him to me? Zhang Deqin looked at the back of Long Jingyu and Long Zhenglin with a puzzled expression, and said with a smile, after not seeing you for a while, Chief Zhang has become humorous. You have invited Jia Ruidao to help you, and we have invited Brother Tang to help us. If Chief Zhang doesn't mind, then we can start the gambling house. Long Jingyu couldn't help but sneer inside his heart, as he could clearly see Zhang Deqin's contempt towards Tang Xiu in her eyes. Alright. When he saw Tan Xiu for the first time, Long Jingyu was indeed a bit disappointed, but because of his younger brother, Long Jingyu didn't judge a book by its cover. Instead, he carefully looked at Tan Xiu, so that he didn't miss Tan Xiu. The following matter seemed to prove that Tan Xiu was far smarter than he imagined. Although Long Jingyu didn't know what happened between Tan Xiu and Zhang Yongjin, Long Jingyu absolutely didn't believe that Zhang Yongjin was panic-stricken, because he recognized the wrong person. Long Jingyu saw with his own eyes that Hu Wanjun and Shui Renfei had a trace of guilty conscience flashing in their eyes when they saw Tan Xiu. Although the panic on their faces was fleeting, Long Jingyu was sensitive enough to see it. One person could say that he recognized the wrong person, but how could three people recognize the wrong person at the same time? What? You asked him to help you? Upon hearing Long Jingyu's words, Zhang Deqin's pair of beautiful eyes instantly turned round as a sharp voice came from her throat. If this old man remembers correctly, there doesn't seem to be such a person in the circle of Shuangqing province. Jia Ruidao looked at Tan Xiu from top to bottom as he said with a sinking tone, Chief Long, are you joking with this old man? Chief Zhang Grandmaster Jia, I'm not joking with you. Brother Tang is indeed not a person in the circle. In fact, after Grandmaster Jia said that he would help Chief Zhang, no one in the circle dared to help this Long. This Long was forced to ask someone from outside the circle to help. Long Jingyu seemed to be very satisfied with the effect caused by the appearance of Tan Xiu, as he patiently explained. Listening to Long Jingyu's slightly helpless and bitter words, a trace of pride flashed on Zhang Deqin and Jia Ruidao's face. They finally believed Long Jingyu's words. Chief Long is really amazing. You can even find a hidden expert among the common people. I'm ashamed of my inferiority, Zhang Deqin and Jia Ruidao hadn't spoken yet when Zhang Yongjin's loud laughter resounded in the room. Although Zhang Yongjin had seen Tan Xiao together with Long Jingyu and Long Zhenglin, he was flustered and didn't think much about it. But now that he knew that Tan Xiao was unexpectedly invited by Long Jingyu and Long Zhenglin to deal with Jia Ruidao, he felt that it was extremely absurd and ridiculed the way he looked at Long Jingyu. Although he didn't know Tan Xiao's real identity, Zhang Yongjin was almost sure that Tan Xiao was a disciple of the agriculture school. And it was very likely that he was a villager from Walled Hill Village. Letting such a country bumpkin compete with Jia Ruidao, a gambling expert, wasn't this the biggest joke in the world? Interesting, it's really interesting. We thought that after we invited Grandmaster Jia, there wouldn't be any gambling expert in the Shuangqing province who would dare to show up. But we never thought that Chief Long would actually be able to invite an expert from outside the circle. Chief Long, if you want to give Walled Hill Village to us, then just say it. Why did you invite someone to deliberately insult Grandmaster Jia? Along with Zhang Yongjin's loud laughter, Shui Renfei and Hu Wanjun also couldn't help but agree. If it was a competition of fighting strength, Zhang Yongjin, Shui Renfei, and Hu Wanjun were a bit afraid of Tan Xiao. But if it was a competition of gambling skills, the three of them weren't inferior to Tan Xiao. Not to mention that the one who would compete with Tan Xiao in gambling skills was not them, but the Shuangqing province's king of gambling, Jia Ruidao. Recalling the scene of them being beaten by Tan Xiao again and again, Zhang Yongjin and the other two gnashed their teeth in hatred. Now that they finally got the opportunity, they naturally couldn't help but ridicule him. Do you know this Mr. Tang? Looking at the unusual reaction of the three people, Zhang Deqin asked with a puzzled expression. It was also at this time that Zhang Yongjin and the other two realized that they had lost control of themselves. Big sis, Yongjin, and Wanjun went to Walled Hill Village yesterday and met this brat at the hilltop. We originally wanted to buy some game from this brat, but this brat refused and even had a fierce dispute with us. Therefore, we got angry when we saw this brat. Shui Renfei knew that he couldn't deceive Zhang Deqin, so he simply stated a part of the facts. Big sis, how could this brat be worthy of the 2 words, mister? As the saying goes, barren hills and unruly rivers give birth to unruly people. This brat has neither culture nor quality. He only has brute force, that's all. Recalling the matter of his car's front cover being smashed, Hu Wanjun gnashed his teeth and said. Zhang Yongjin also had the intention to ridicule Tan Xiao. But when he saw the faint smile on the corner of Tan Xiao's mouth from the corner of his eyes, his body subconsciously shivered and didn't dare to say anything. Well, since the people from both sides have arrived, we can start the gambling game. After this game, this old man still has to catch the plane to Macau. Jia Ruidao glared at Long Jingyu with dissatisfaction as he spoke in a bad mood. Obviously, Jia Ruidao had heard the words of Zhang Yongjin and the other two. He felt that today's gambling game was a complete farce. Long Jingyu invited Tan Xiao not to win the gambling game, but rather to humiliate him. Therefore, Jia Ruidao already bore a grudge against Long Jingyu in his heart. Seeing the expression in Jia Ruidao's eyes, Long Jingyu couldn't help but feel his heart thumping. He knew that the opposite party had misunderstood him, and he also knew the consequences of offending the gambling king. However, thinking that Jia Ruidao had already chosen to stand on the opposite side of him, Long Jingyu quickly became indifferent. If Brother Tang doesn't have any objection, then let's start the gambling game. Long Jingyu didn't explain anything, but instead, he looked at Tan Xiao with an inquiring gaze. Tan Xiao wanted to ask about the type of gambling game and the gambling rules, but he swallowed the words back when they were at the tip of his tongue. Tan Xiao knew that if he asked, he would definitely be laughed at. Moreover, he would also implicate Long Jingyu and Long Zhenglin to be looked down upon by others. Therefore, it was better not to ask. I don't have any problem, we can start at any time. Indifferently sweeping a glance at Zhang Yongjin and the others, Tan Xiao didn't have the slightest look of anger, but rather indifferently said. Seeing Tan Xiao's unfathomable look, Jia Ruidao coldly snorted, and then pressed the call bell on the table. Brat, do you want to compete in size, odd or even odd or other games? While waiting for the waiter, Jia Ruidao condescendingly said to Tan Xiao. Hearing the word brat, Tan Xiao's eyes couldn't help but flash with anger, because this appellation was too harsh. Old thing, choose what you are best at, so that you won't have to find excuses when you lose. When Tan Xiao discovered that his blindly retreating would only be exchanged for the other party's bullying, Tan Xiao no longer retreated, and launched a fierce counterattack. Since you want to humiliate yourself, then let's compete in size. It's simple and time-saving. Jia Ruidao angrily said. Of course, I don't dare to ask you. Hearing Jia Ruidao's words, Tan Xiao was overjoyed in his heart and blurted out. What Tan Xiao feared the most was that Jia Ruidao would propose a complex game. If he did, he would have to spend time to figure out the rules of the game and adapt to the rules of the game. He was afraid that the learning and adaptation time would be too long, and he would lose the gamble. Although Tan Xiao had never played gambling, he had seen it on TV. He had also seen it when he went to the KTV with his classmates. He was not a stranger to gambling. Tan Xiao was afraid that if he agreed too late, Jia Ruidao would go back on his words. Therefore, when Jia Ruidao's words fell, he couldn't wait to agree. Although Tan Xiao rarely gambled, he knew that gambling was nothing more than sharp eyes, quick hands, and sharp ears. Jia Ruidao's technique was very skillful and superb. His arm was motionless, just like a fixed bracket. Only his wrist was moving. This allowed Jia Ruidao to reduce the range of his movements. Not only did it increase his speed, but it also saved a lot of physical strength. Jia Ruidao's eyes didn't look at the dice cup, nor did he look at the table. Instead, he slowly swept his eyes over everyone in the room. In particular, his gaze lingered on Long Jingyu and Tan Xiao for a long time. Jia Ruidao's ears slightly trembled from time to time. However, everyone's attention was focused on his hands, so no one noticed the subtle movements of Jia Ruidao's ears. Jia Ruidao's skill in shaking the dice cup was enough to deter the majority of people. Not to mention that Jia Ruidao had real kung fu. Unfortunately, Jia Ruidao's opponent was Tan Xiao. Not only was Tan Xiao's senses dozens of times stronger than ordinary people, but his brain was also nearly 100 times faster than ordinary people. Others didn't notice the subtle trembling of Jia Ruidao's ears, but Tan Xiao noticed it. In the beginning, Tan Xiao thought that the subtle trembling of Jia Ruidao's ears was accidental, so he didn't pay any attention to it. However, when Tan Xiao discovered that the subtle trembling of Jia Ruidao's ears was extremely regular and continuous, he immediately paid attention to it. That's not right. It's not that there is no sound when the dice are rolling in the dice cup, but the sound is very subtle. Ordinary people simply can't hear it. Tan Xiao quickly determined that Jia Ruidao should be listening to the rolling sound of the dice in the dice cup. At the same time, he was adjusting the number of the dice through the shaking of his wrist. Soon, Tan Xiao's attention was completely focused on the rolling sound of the dice. After all, it was Tan Xiao's first time playing dice with other people. Moreover, he was playing dice with a gambling king. He didn't dare to have the slightest bit of carelessness, lest he let down the Long brothers. And at the same time, he would also miss the opportunity to obtain the spiritual vein of Walled Hill Village. On the other side, Zhang Deqin, Zhang Yongjin, Hu Wanjun, and Shui Renfei were watching Jia Ruidao's dazzling movements. Their eyes revealed a fanatical and excited expression. Especially when they saw Tan Xiao's confused and sluggish expression, they became even happier. As if Walled Hill Village had already fallen into their hands, Zhang Deqin and the others looked at the Long brothers with eyes brimming with pity and sympathy. It was a kind of winner looking at the loser. At this moment, the two brothers, Long Jingyu and Long Zhenglin, had a worried expression on their faces. It was because Jia Ruidao's movements were really too beautiful. Jia Ruidao obviously didn't show any carelessness because his opponent was an outsider, but chose to go all out. Looking at Jia Ruidao's concentrated appearance, Long Jingyu and Long Zhenglin brothers were scared witless. Didn't you just invite an outsider to gamble with you? Why are you so angry? Wait! Seeing that Jia Ruidao's movements were about to bring the atmosphere inside the room to its climax, an abrupt voice suddenly resounded inside the room, startling everyone. Jia Ruidao's hand movements also slowed down, and the dices that were originally attached to the dice cup almost fell to the ground. At this critical moment, it was actually Tan Xiao who spoke. Tan Xiao could see that Jia Ruidao's condition was getting better and better. If he let Jia Ruidao continue to play like this, then he would most likely lose to his opponent today. Therefore, he had no choice but to forcefully interrupt his opponent's condition. Since Grandmaster Jia is so confident in his gambling skills, why don't we change the best of 5 games to the best of 3 games? Under Jia Ruidao's blazing eyes, Tan Xiao spoke in a neither fast nor slow manner. Hearing Tan Xiao's words, Jia Ruidao had the urge to take a knife and chop someone. Don't say best of 3 games, even if we decide the winner in 1 game, so what? Facing Jia Ruidao's provocation, Tan Xiao decisively chose to temporarily avoid it. For Tan Xiao, interrupting the opponent's condition was good enough. Whether it was best of 5 games or best of 3 games wasn't important at all. Of course, the risk of deciding the winner in 1 game was too big, so Tan Xiao naturally wouldn't agree to it. Then, according to Grandmaster Jia's words, let's finish this quickly and win the best of 3 games. Tan Xiao agreed with a smile, and his face was filled with gratitude. He's really afraid that he won't die fast enough. If we win the best of 5 games, then maybe he can rely on luck to win this gambling game. But he actually proposed to win the best of 3 games. I can understand his mentality. Since he's going to die anyway, he might as well die quickly and avoid suffering so much pain. This is also good, so as to avoid wasting everyone's time. I feel uncomfortable just looking at this kid. Almost no one was able to see the intention of Tan Xiao's sudden voice. They just thought that Tan Xiao was afraid and guilty, and wanted to leave this suffocating situation as soon as possible. So he couldn't help but interrupt Jia Ruidao's movement of shaking the dice. After Jia Ruidao disdainfully stared at Tan Xiao, he shook the dice cup in his hand again. But this time, Jia Ruidao couldn't find the subtle feeling from before, and the movement of his hand seemed to have become a lot slower, which made him feel extremely uncomfortable in his heart. A few seconds later, Jia Ruidao put the dice cup upside down on the table, and all the eyes in the room were attracted to the dice cup. Under everyone's nervous gaze, Jia Ruidao slowly opened the inverted dice cup, revealing the points of the dice. Wow, 6 points. Grandmaster Jia shook out a 6 points. We're going to win. Grandmaster is really worthy of being called a grandmaster. How many points do you want? How many points do you want? If I also have grandmaster's means, it would be great. It would simply be a weapon to pick up girls. After clearly seeing the points of the dice, Zhang Yongjin and the other 2 couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, and even Zhang Deqin's face revealed a satisfied smile. On the other side, Long Jingyu and Long Jinglin's complexion became extremely ugly, and Tan Xiao's complexion also became dignified. Long Jingyu and Long Jinglin were scared by Jia Ruidao's gambling skills, and Tan Xiao didn't think that Jia Ruidao would be able to shake out a satisfactory number in a bad condition. Brat, do you want to directly admit defeat, or do you want to continue to try your luck? Jia Ruidao looked at Tan Xiao with a provocative look. Old guy, you want to subdue the enemy without a fight. You don't have that ability. Tan Xiao glared at Jia Ruidao, and then picked up the dice cup in his hand, and threw a dice into the dice cup, and slowly shook it in his hand. Seeing Tan Xiao's jerky and clumsy movements, Jia Ruidao's eyes couldn't help but reveal a ridiculing smile, and Zhang Deqin subconsciously breathed a sigh of relief. Haha, I'm dying of laughter. He doesn't even know how to shake the dice, and he actually dared to show his incompetence in front of Grandmaster Jia. He really is displaying his slight skill in front of an expert. This brat's gambling skills are even worse than mine, but his face is much thicker than mine. It's really hard for Chief Long to actually be able to find such a weirdo. You're not ashamed, but we feel scared in our hearts. Although other people felt that Tan Xiao's gambling skills were too bad, but they didn't say anything. But Zhang Yongjin and the other 2 were completely unable to control their urge to burst into laughter. If you continue to destroy the gambling house, I don't mind asking you to leave. Just as Zhang Yongjin and the other 2 unscrupulously laughed, Long Jingyu coldly said. Long Jingyu's words were like a pair of invisible big hands that pinched the necks of Zhang Yongjin and the other two, making them instantly speechless. Although Tan Xiu's skill in shaking the dice was very clumsy, but since the gambling house had already started, it was prohibited to make any noise in the house, let alone loudly ridiculing the behavior of the gambler like Zhang Yongjin and the other two. If the gambling house's result was unfair because of the influence of the outside world, the gambling house could be declared invalid. So Long Jingyu's words had an absolute deterrent force. Seeing the scene of Zhang Yongjin and the other two's necks turning red, Tan Xiu's face revealed a proud smile, and at the same time, his hands' movements also slowly accelerated. Chapter 42. Although it was the first time for Tan Xiu to shake the dice, but his memory was good, and his learning ability was amazing. Tang Xiu only carefully observed Jia Ruidao's movements when he shook the dice once, and then copied Jia Ruidao's technique. In the beginning, Tan Xiu's imitation of Jia Ruidao's movements and techniques was a bit jerky, but slowly, he became more and more skilled, and his movements and techniques almost became a copy of Jia Ruidao's. Jia Ruidao didn't put Tan Xiu in his heart. He also didn't think much of Tan Xiu's movements and techniques. But when he found that Tan Xiu's movements and techniques were getting more and more familiar, he finally couldn't help but exclaim out loud. One must know that Jia Ruidao had pondered and perfected for more than 30 years, and only then did he gradually form his own unique skill. But Tan Xiu only looked at it once, and he was able to learn 70% of his unique skill. This made Jia Ruidao doubt whether his decades of pondering was in vain or not. Although Jia Ruidao had received several apprentices, and also taught his own unique skill to his apprentices, he could be sure that even his apprentices couldn't learn his unique skills so thoroughly, let alone his several good-for-nothing grand disciples. Looking at a stranger displaying his unique skill in front of him, an indescribable feeling welled up in Jia Ruidao's heart, but it was hard for him to describe it. This kid is an outsider, and he obviously just came into contact with this circle. His perception is so strong. If I accept him as my apprentice, wouldn't it mean that I have a successor? Suddenly, this thought emerged in Jia Ruidao's mind, and then it couldn't be stopped. When Jia Ruidao changed his attitude towards Tan Xiu, he found that Tan Xiu was more and more pleasing to the eye. Although Tan Xiu's clothes were a bit plain, they were very clean and tidy. His short black hair made him look particularly spirited. Coupled with his bright and piercing eyes, his high nose bridge, thin lips and tall and straight figure, he gave off a kind of handsome and compelling feeling. When the other people in the room heard Jia Ruidao's exclamation, they felt baffled. Other people didn't know that gambling experts had their own unique skills. In their opinion, everyone's movements when shaking the dice were almost the same. They didn't seriously remember Jia Ruidao's movements when he shook the dice. They also didn't know that Tan Xiu's movements when he shook the dice were surprisingly similar to Jia Ruidao's movements. A few minutes later, the dice cup in Tang Xiu's hand was turned upside down on the table. Beads of sweat oozed out from his forehead. At the same time, a tired look was revealed on his face, mixed with a bit of nervousness. Although Tan Xiu had tried his best, and had also digested and absorbed 90% of Jia Ruidao's unique skill, but a lot of things were accumulated over time and experience, and not something that could be learned with just a glance. Tan Xiu could completely copy Jia Ruidao's technique when shaking the dice, but he didn't have the means to copy Jia Ruidao's unique skill of using his ears to distinguish the number of the dice. The reason why Tan Xiu's shaking time was much longer than Jia Ruidao's. On one hand, he was looking for the feeling of shaking the dice, so that he could be more skilled in shaking the dice. On the other hand, he was listening to the sound of the dice rolling inside the dice cup. He tried to use the subtle changes in the sound to confirm the number of the dice. Open it. Now that the dice cup has fallen, the result has already been determined. Even if you don't open it, it won't affect the result. Seeing that Tan Xiu was pressing the dice cup for a long time, Zhang Yongjin anxiously urged from the side. Tan Xiu didn't pay attention to Zhang Yongjin. Instead, he wiped the sweat from the corner of his eyes and slowly opened the dice cup. In the process of opening the dice cup, Tan Xiao had a nervous look on his face. Even his right hand that was holding the dice cup was slightly trembling. Haha, 1 point, just 1 point. I'm dying of laughter. With this luck, you can go out and buy a lottery ticket. When Tang Xiao completely opened the dice cup, Zhang Yongjin couldn't help but burst into laughter. Xuerenfei and Hu Wanjun also couldn't help but ridicule Tang Xiao. Zhang Deqin and Jia Ruidao were subconsciously relieved. Previously, Zhang Deqin and Jia Ruidao were worried that Tan Xiao was a hidden gambling master among the common people, and that they would fail miserably in this gamble. But when Tan Xiao opened the dice cup, the doubts in their hearts disappeared, and their hearts also fell to the ground. Did I lose? When Tan Xiao saw the bright red dot, his eyes couldn't help but flash a touch of frustration. Brother Tang, it's nothing. There are still 2 more chances. Although Long Jingyu was discouraged in his heart, he could see that Tan Xiao had tried his best. So he didn't speak out to accuse or complain, but rather, he softly consoled him from the side. Boss, don't be discouraged. The final winner will definitely be you. Long Zhenglin was also full of confidence. Seeing that the Long brothers still believed in Tan Xiao at this time, Zhang Deqin's eyes couldn't help but flash a touch of doubt. She couldn't help but look at Tan Xiao, Zhang Yongjin, and the other 2 naturally couldn't help but ridicule. Little brother, do you still want to continue? Jia Ruidao stared at Tan Xiao for a moment, and then asked with a smile. Grandmaster Jia, please. Hearing the change in Jia Ruidao's tone when he spoke to him, Tan Xiao was surprised for a moment, and then immediately greeted him with a different form of address. This time, Jia Ruidao's movement of shaking the dices was very slow, and he also reduced a lot of fancy movements. At the same time, the dices in the dice cup suddenly made a sound. Upon seeing this, Tan Xiao's eyes couldn't help but shine. He subconsciously looked at Jia Ruidao, and found that Jia Ruidao was vaguely winking at him. Moreover, the other party's gaze was also full of appreciation. Tan Xiao immediately understood that Jia Ruidao was intentionally showing goodwill to him. Although he didn't know why Jia Ruidao would have such a change, but Tan Xiao knew that this was absolutely a good thing for him. Therefore, he began to carefully listen to the changes in the dice's sound inside the dice cup. The second gamble was a lot more difficult compared to the first gamble. In the first gamble, there was only 1 dices inside the dice cup, but in the second gamble, the dices inside the dice cup had increased to 3. Distinguishing the sound of 1 dices was easy, but distinguishing the sound of 3 dices at the same time was actually several times more difficult. If it was replaced by an ordinary person, they naturally wouldn't listen to the sound to distinguish the dice's point size, let alone control the dice's point size inside the dice cup. After shaking the dice cup a few times, they would invert it on the table, and then leave it to fate. Jia Ruidao wasn't an ordinary person, he was a professional gambler. His professional ethics didn't allow him to be perfunctory. Therefore, he was very seriously distinguishing the rolling and colliding sounds of the dices inside the dice cup. And at the same time, he was controlling the changes in the dice's points through the shaking of his wrist. However, this time, Jia Ruidao didn't put down the dice cup, but had been observing the changes in Tan Xiao's complexion. When Jia Ruidao found that Tan Xiao's complexion had become relaxed, and his eyes also revealed a relieved look, he put down the dice cup. After Jia Ruidao opened the inverted dice cup, the final points of the 3 dices were displayed. Impressively, it was 5, 5, 6, and the total number of the dices was 16. Seeing that Jia Ruidao didn't get 18 points, Zhang Deqin's face couldn't help but flash a touch of worry. Even the Zhang Yongjin trio was also nervous. But thinking of Tan Xiao's rookie gambling skills, they immediately felt relieved. Although Grandmaster Jia didn't get the full points, but it wasn't far from the full points. Tan Xiao could only rely on his luck to determine the number of points. Relying on luck to get the full points was too slim. Zhang Deqin and others didn't believe that Tan Xiao could rely on luck to get the full points. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if Grandmaster Jia lost to Tan Xiao, both sides would still be tied. There was still a third round to determine the outcome. Tan Xiao couldn't rely on luck to win against Grandmaster Jia, right? After nodding to Jia Ruidao, Tan Xiu also picked up the dice cup and dices, and then started his second round. Through the first round of adaptation and training, Tan Xiu's movement of shaking the dices had obviously become a lot more proficient and faster. Therefore, he put more of his energy into distinguishing the changes of the dices inside the dice cup. Tan Xiu only shook it for more than a minute before he put down the dice cup, making everyone in the room surprised. "Kid, you won't give up, right?" Remembering that Jia Ruidao shook the dice cup for a full 5 minutes before stopping, while Tan Xiu only shook it for less than a minute, Zhang Yongjin naturally didn't think that Tan Xiu's gambling skills were better than Jia Ruidao's. Rather, he thought that Tan Xiu didn't want to continue to put on an act. Grandmaster Jia's strength has already deterred him. He can't not give up. "Kid, you finally have self-awareness. Your gambling skills are not as good as others. It's useless for you to shake the dices for a long time. It's better to rely on luck. This way, it's better to finish it quickly, so as to not waste everyone's time." When Shui Renfei, Hu Wanjun, and Zhang Deqin saw Tan Xiu's action, they were stunned for a moment, and then subconsciously ridiculed him. The next moment, everyone in the room stared at him with their eyes wide open. Zhang Deqin and Zhang Yongjin's faces were flushed red. Shui Renfei, Hu Wanjun, and Jia Ruidao's eyes were filled with disbelief. Because the moment Tan Xiu opened the dice cup, the dice points inside the dice cup were clearly displayed in front of everyone. 5, 6, 6, a total of 17 points. Just a little more than Jia Ruidao's previous 16 points. We actually won. Although Long Jingyu was comforting Tan Xiu before, in fact, he didn't have too much hope for Tan Xiu. But the long-established etiquette and self-cultivation made him choose to comfort Tan Xiu instead of blaming and complaining. "Boss, I know you can do it. Brother, do you believe my words now?" The first half of Long Zhonglin's sentence was said to Tan Xiu, but the second half was said to Long Jingyu. At this time, Long Zhonglin was dancing with joy like a child. After repeatedly confirming that the dice points inside the dice cup in front of Tan Xiu were 17 points, and that his eyes weren't playing tricks on him, Long Jingyu finally sobered up from the huge shock. He vigorously waved his fist, and then hugged his younger brother, as tears of excitement flowed out from his eyes. Because the Walled Hill Village project was too important for Long Jingyu. Whether this step could be taken or not, it was directly related to Long Jingyu's entire life plan. Therefore, for this project, he racked his brains and racked his brains, spending nearly 3 years from start to finish. If this project was suddenly intercepted by someone else, Long Jingyu didn't know whether he could face the outcome of failure or not. This was also the reason why he begged people everywhere. And finally, he even believed his younger brother's words and asked an outsider to help him. "Your fucking luck is really good. I don't believe that you can win next time." After being silent for a long time, Zhang Yongjin spoke with a sour tone. But this time, Zhang Yongjin's words obviously didn't have the same confidence as before. No one else echoed him, because the others were still immersed in the shock of Tan Xiu's 17 points and hadn't sobered up. Chapter 43. "Mr. Jia, please." Tan Xiu smiled at Jia Ruidao, and once again made a gesture to invite him to fight. Regarding Jia Ruidao, Tan Xiu is very grateful. If it wasn't for Jia Ruidao deliberately slowing down the speed of shaking the dice, revealing a lot of key points, Tan Xiu certainly wouldn't be able to grasp the real skill of shaking the dice so quickly. Jia Ruidao threw a peach, and Tan Xiu returned the favor. The two people's eye contact is just a matter of a moment. Outsiders simply can't see the subtle changes in the relationship between the two. After all, Jia Ruidao was invited by Zhang Deqin at a high price to deal with the Long's dining hall. If he is too intimate with Tan Xiu, if he wins against the Long's dining hall, everything will be fine. But if he loses to the Long's dining hall, people will definitely misunderstand that there is something fishy going on in the gambling house. Jia Ruidao nodded towards Tan Xiu, and then picked up the dice cup again, starting the third gamble between the two of them. This time, Jia Ruidao put 5 dice into the dice cup. The moment the dice cup shook, Jia Ruidao's eyes flashed with a touch of brilliance, and then his wrist shook in a very rhythmic manner. Only a burst of schwa 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 sound was heard, followed by a burst of muffled bang 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 sound, followed by a burst of sharp DDD sound. The 5 dice collided with each other in the dice cup for a while. Sometimes they collided neatly into a certain spot in the dice cup. Sometimes they collided randomly in all directions. These sounds that should have been messy actually converged into a cheerful and bright melody. So gambling can also be played like this. Feeling the intense fighting intent emitting from Jia Ruidao's body, Tan Xiu's eyes lit up, and the way he looked at Jia Ruidao also became fiery. Tan Xiu can see that Jia Ruidao didn't intend to throw the game, just because he appreciated his ability, but decided to go all out. This was also the situation that Tan Xiu was most willing to see. Admittedly, Jia Ruidao was feeling lonely at the top. After suddenly encountering an opponent, he became excited. But how could Tan Xiu not want to challenge his own limits? He wanted to experience the true joy of gambling instead of winning through others' modesty. Under the shaking of Jia Ruidao's wrist, the dice cup was just like a butterfly flying through the flowers, dancing in the air. The naked eyes were completely unable to see the traces of the dice cup. Everyone could only see the beautiful arcs, as well as the confident and calm smile on Jia Ruidao's face. The people inside the house obviously didn't expect that Jia Ruidao would have this kind of unique skill. Listening to the dice cup music suddenly resounding inside the house, all of them were stunned. This was a very strange feeling, because no one had ever imagined that the sound of shaking dice could be so pleasing to the ear, full of melody. Almost everyone was staring at Jia Ruidao's movements with rapt attention. Along with the shaking of his wrist, they couldn't help but nod. Everyone's face revealed an intoxicated look. For fear of disturbing Jia Ruidao's rhythm, the people inside the house didn't even dare to breathe loudly. Their eyes were wide open as they held their breath and motionlessly enjoyed the wonderful journey brought by Jia Ruidao. Time passed by unknowingly. Only when a muffled bang sound was heard did everyone sober up from their intoxication. Looking up, they saw that Jia Ruidao had already finished shaking the dice cup and put the dice cup upside down on the table. Grandmaster Jia is really amazing. This is the real gambling. Those gambling masters we saw before are simply too weak. The gambling king is indeed the gambling king. Even shaking the dice can give people a pleasant feeling. Almost when Jia Ruidao's movement stopped, the house was filled with praises one after another. Even Long Jingyu and Long Jingyu brothers were not stingy with their praises. At this moment, it seemed that winning or losing was no longer important. Everyone had been completely convinced by Jia Ruidao's gambling skills. Amidst everyone's praises, Jia Ruidao slowly opened the dice cup and revealed the points of the dice inside the dice cup. Full point, it's actually a full point. We will win. Worthy to be called Grandmaster Jia. His movements are so handsome, and his control of the points is also so good. I am completely convinced. It's a pity that Grandmaster Jia is no longer willing to accept apprentices. Otherwise, I will definitely worship Grandmaster Jia as my master. When the dice's points were revealed, Zhang Yongjin, Shurenfei, and Hu Wanjun couldn't help but exclaim out loud again. Their faces turned red because of excitement as they danced like children. Zhang Deqin's face also revealed a charming smile. She looked at Long Jingyu and Long Jingyu brothers, and her eyes couldn't help but flash with pity and sympathy. Although Long Jingyu and Long Jinglin brothers appreciated Jia Ruidao's gambling skills, when the dice's points were revealed, they still couldn't help but feel a sense of loss and discomfort in their hearts. Especially Long Jingyu. The moment the result came out, his body swayed, and he almost staggered and fell to the ground. Brother Tang, you have tried your best. It's okay, we can afford to lose. Seeing the nervous face of Tan Xiu, Long Jingyu patted the other's shoulder and softly comforted him. What kind of expression is this? I haven't even started yet. Do you think that the result of the gambling game has already been decided? Feeling that the atmosphere in the room was a bit wrong, Tan Xiu loudly shouted. Under everyone's doubtful and contemptuous eyes, Tan Xiu picked up the dice cup, put 5 dice into the dice cup, and then shook it. When they heard Tan Xiu's words, Zhang Yongjin, Hu Wanjun, and Shurenfei subconsciously wanted to ridicule him. But Tan Xiu's movements were too fast. They didn't even have the time to open their mouths when Tan Xiu had already started to shake the dice. Remembering the rules of the gambling game, they had to resist the urge to make a sound and just looked at Tan Xiu with disdain. Dong! Dong dong, dong dong dong. If the sound of Jia Ruidao's dice shaking was like a cheerful symphony that was pleasing to the eye, then the sound of Tang Xiu's dice shaking was like a heavy war drum that nearly suffocated people. Hearing the sound of the dice cup in Tan Xiu's hand, Jia Ruidao's eyes couldn't help but lit up. Before, when Jia Ruidao stopped shaking the dice, a trace of regret appeared in his heart. He was too excited a moment ago, so much so that his skill in shaking the dice suddenly rose to another level, and his performance was far better than the usual level. He was afraid that his extraordinary performance would hit Tan Xiu, making Tan Xiu unable to recover. But when Tan Xiu didn't give up, and even displayed a skill that was completely different from his skill in shaking the dice, Jia Ruidao's heart, in addition to being happy, was even more shocked. Other people were also completely dumbfounded, as if they were hypnotized. Each and every one of them stared blankly at Tan Xiu. They didn't know what was going on. It seemed like a moment, but it also seemed like 10,000 years. When Tan Xiu's movement suddenly stopped, the people in the room almost unanimously shook their heads, sobering themselves up from the illusion. Under everyone's gaze, Tan Xiu slowly opened the dice cup. It's also a full point. How is this possible? No, I must have seen it wrong. He just casually shook it a few times. How could it be a 6? This luck, this luck. After clearly seeing the dice's points, the faces of the people in the room were filled with disbelief, especially Shui Renfei, Hu Wanjun, and Zhang Yongjin. The three of them were dumbfounded as they cried out in alarm. Grandmaster Jia, shall we continue? Tan Xiu glanced at Jia Ruidao, who was also in a sluggish state, and loudly invited him to continue. Okay, let's continue. Jia Ruidao stared at Tan Xiu for a long time, and then replied with overflowing fighting intent. When everyone hadn't completely recovered from the shock caused by Tan Xiu, Jia Ruidao and Tan Xiu had already started the 4th round of gambling. This time, Jia Ruidao directly placed 6 dice in the dice cup. With our level of shaking the dice, it seems that comparing the number of dice seems to have lost its meaning. It is possible that we won't be able to determine the result even after dark. Why don't we increase the difficulty a bit? Before Jia Ruidao began to shake the dice, his eyes suddenly moved as he said with a smile on his face. Hearing Jia Ruidao's words, everyone in the room couldn't help but stare blankly. Jia Ruidao was actually able to say such words. Didn't this mean that he admitted that Tan Xiu's skill in shaking the dice was on par with him? Grandmaster Jia, how do you plan to gamble? Tan Xiu's interest also increased after hearing this. Both of us will shake the dice at the same time, and simultaneously put it down. Then, we will guess the number of dice in the other's dice cup. Whoever guesses correctly will win. Jia Ruidao said with a playful smile. Everything is as Grandmaster says. Not waiting for the Long Jingyu and Long Jinglin brothers to refute, Tan Xiu smiled and agreed. You brat really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. You actually dare to play a game of guessing the number of dice with Grandmaster Jia. Comparing the number of dice can rely on luck, but guessing the number of dice cannot rely on luck. When Zhang Yongjin heard Jia Ruidao's words, it seemed that he approved of Tan Xiu's skill in shaking the dice. His heart felt very uncomfortable. But now, seeing that Tan Xiu actually dared to agree to Jia Ruidao's new gambling method, he suddenly couldn't help but speak up. One must know that Zhang Yongjin was extremely fond of gambling. He had once begged Jia Ruidao to accept him as an apprentice. However, ever since Jia Ruidao accepted him as an apprentice 3 years ago, he used his old age as an excuse and was no longer willing to accept any apprentices. Jia Ruidao was not short of money, so Zhang Yongjin's unique trick of throwing money didn't work. He could only lament his inadequacy. Zhang Yongjin never thought that Tan Xiu, who was always at odds with him, would unexpectedly be recognized by Jia Ruidao. This naturally made Zhang Yongjin very unhappy. It turns out that Grandmaster Jia's fierceness is not only reflected in the gambling skill itself. Grandmaster Jia's skills outside of gambling are also unique. This Long can be considered to have experienced it today. Just as Zhang Yongjin's voice faded, Long Zhenglin coldly snorted. Long Zhenglin was originally worried that Tan Xiu's gambling skill was not as good as Jiao Dao's. But now, he finally saw that Tan Xiu had a hope of winning in shaking the dice. He never thought that Jiao Dao would change his gambling method, and Tan Xiu even agreed to it. Long Zhenglin didn't see the subtle changes in the relationship between Tan Xiu and Jiao Dao. In his view, Jiao Dao was just using a provocation method a moment ago, and Tan Xiu was too young. Then, he was defeated by Jiao Dao's sugar-coated bullet, and under his impulse, he accepted Jiao Dao's gambling invitation. Naturally, Long Zhenglin was very anxious. In fact, it wasn't only Long Zhenglin who was anxious. Long Jingyu was even more anxious. However, Long Jingyu's temperament was obviously calm, so he was able to control his emotions. On the other side, Zhang Deqin and several other people were beaming with joy. Although Tan Xiu's skill in shaking the dice a moment ago had startled them, but the gambling skill displayed by Jiao Dao had swayed their minds and made them full of confidence. Especially after Jiao Dao proposed to change the gambling method, Zhang Deqin and others became even more excited. Chapter 44. Are you afraid? If you are afraid, then just directly admit defeat. Long Zhenglin's words suddenly attracted Zhang Yongjin's attention. He quickly pointed the spearhead at Long Zhenglin and mocked him. It's simply a joke. Grandmaster Jia's words made him so complacent that he can't even find his position. Sure enough, the older the ginger, the spicier. Grandmaster Jia is simply too powerful. Shurenfei and Hu Wanjun squinted at Tan Xiu. Their faces were full of ridicule. Tan Xiu turned a deaf ear to Zhang Yongjin and others' ridicule. He and Jiao Dao looked at each other, and then picked up the dice cup and shook it. Although Tan Xiu didn't speak, it was better than countless words. When Tan Xiu began to shake the dice cup, Zhang Yongjin, Hu Wanjun, and Shurenfei felt as if their necks were being strangled. They were no longer able to say a word. The smile on their faces also froze at the same time. Their appearance was very awkward. With their identity, if they were to meet Tan Xiu on the street, they were simply too lazy to look at Tan Xiu. But now, they took the initiative to talk to Tan Xiu, but they were ignored by Tan Xiu. This was simply more uncomfortable than slapping them in the face. But because of the gambling rules, they couldn't do anything now. Therefore, their hearts were as sullen as they could be. Looking at Tan Xiu with an appreciative look, Jiao Dao also picked up the dice cup and shook it. The room instantly turned silent. Only the sound of the two dice cups and the fierce collision of the dice could be heard. For a moment it was sunny, and for a moment it was stormy. For a moment it was calm, and for a moment it was stormy. Along with the shaking of Jiao Dao and Tan Xiu's wrists, the sound in the room was fast, slow, light, and heavy. Everyone's heart was up and down, and their faces were full of tension. Jiao Dao and Tan Xiu were tightly staring at each other's eyes. They didn't pay attention to the dice cups in their hands. When everyone in the room was almost suffocating, only a muffled bang sound was heard. Jiao Dao and Tan Xiu simultaneously slammed the dice cups in their hands on the table. Do you want to go first, or should I? Jiao Dao looked at Tan Xiu and asked with a smile. Grandmaster Jia should go first. Tan Xiu made a gesture of invitation and said respectfully. Although the two of them were fighting just now, they were communicating more. In the end, the two of them even entered a state of mutual accompaniment. After fighting for a while, not only did the two of them deepen their understanding and familiarity with each other, but they also forged a deep friendship. It could be said that they appreciated each other. Hearing Tan Xiu's words, a thoughtful look appeared on Jiao Dao's face. 4 o'clock. No, 6 o'clock. After thinking for a long time, Jiao Dao spoke out a number. However, after saying this number, he instantly changed his words, and his face revealed an awkward expression. Clearly seeing Jiao Dao's reaction, Zhang Deqin and the others couldn't help but be stunned. Zhang Deqin and the others had a kind of fanatical worship and trust towards Jiao Dao's gambling skills. They had also witnessed Jiao Dao's casino legend one after another. They had never thought that Jia Ruidao would have a moment of uncertainty in the casino. But now, they saw Jia Ruidao hesitate. Moreover, Jia Ruidao actually hesitated in front of an outsider, a newcomer in the casino. This made their jaws drop to the ground. Grandmaster Jia, are you sure you won't change it? Tan Xiao didn't immediately open the dice cup, but asked with a pondering expression. You won't change it. Jia Ruidao was choked by Tan Xiao's words, and almost lost his breath. However, thinking of his arrogance and rudeness when he saw Tan Xiao, he endured the anger in his heart. Grandmaster Jia, I'm sorry but you guessed wrong. Tan Xiao wanted to give Jia Ruidao another chance, but he was afraid that doing so would hurt Jia Ruidao's self-esteem. Therefore, he very generously opened the dice cup. At the moment when Tan Xiao opened the dice cup, Jia Ruidao's complexion couldn't help but turn pale, and his body also started to sway. Because the 6 dices in Tan Xiao's dice cup were actually stacked into a pillar. Only the top dices revealed the points, while the rest of the dices were completely covered. According to the rules of the dice game, when the dices were stacked, the points of the topmost dices would be calculated. At this time, the topmost dices in Tan Xiao's dices were impressively 4. In other words, when Jia Ruidao guessed the points, he guessed correctly the first time, but he guessed wrong the second time. Moreover, he insisted on the wrong answer. This old man has been unhindered in the casino for many years. Except for those years when I just started to learn, I have never met any opponent in the Shuangqing province. Today, this old man finally understood the true meaning of the words the younger generation will surpass us in time. Jia Ruidao stared at Tan Xiao for a long time before he turned around and walked away. Only when Jia Ruidao walked to the door did Zhang Deqin and the others react to what had happened. Hey Grandmaster Jia, don't go. The result of our bet still hasn't come out. Grandmaster Jia, please wait. It's not necessarily that you lost. Zhang Deqin and Zhang Yongjin immediately chased after Jia Ruidao and hurriedly urged him to stay. Hu Wanjun hesitated for a moment and also chased after them. Only Shui Renfei vigilantly stared at Jia Ruidao's dice cup, fearing that Tan Xiao and the others would peek. In the end, Zhang Deqin and the others were still unable to stop Jia Ruidao. In fact, the moment Jia Ruidao turned around and left, Zhang Deqin knew that it was impossible for her to stop Jia Ruidao. Jia Ruidao's character was extremely stubborn. Once he decided on something, it would be very difficult for others to change his mind. Returning back to the house in a gloomy mood, Zhang Deqin and the others were stunned for a moment when they saw the dice cup that had yet to be opened. Then their eyes lit up. The bet still hasn't ended? Doesn't this mean that I haven't lost yet? For a moment, the frustration and discouragement on the faces of Zhang Deqin and the others disappeared. They instantly became excited. Chief Long, I don't know if this gambling expert you invited can guess the number in the dice cup? Zhang Deqin's gaze stayed on Tan Xiao's face for a moment before she sneered and said. Although Zhang Deqin had now faintly recognized Tan Xiao's gambling skills, she still believed that it was impossible for Tan Xiao's gambling skills to be higher than Jia Ruidao's. Therefore, her words and actions didn't show due respect to Tan Xiao. 3 points. Almost as soon as Zhang Deqin's voice fell, Tan Xiao answered without hesitation. Hearing Tan Xiao's words, Zhang Deqin couldn't help but feel angry. Under Zhang Deqin's nod, Shui Renfei slowly opened the dice cup, revealing the dices. Unlike Tang Xiao's dices, which were all stacked into a column, Jia Ruidao's dices were divided into 3 groups. Each group had 2 dices, and each dices were overlapped. Only the topmost dices showed the number, and these numbers were all 1 without exception. When everyone in the house clearly saw the number of dices in Jia Ruidao's dice cup, they were suddenly stunned. We won. Brother, did you see it? We won. Long Zhonglin was the first one who couldn't help but excitedly cheer. I said that boss can do it. Now, you should believe me, right? Long Jingyu's face was also full of happiness, but he didn't lose his self-control due to excitement. Instead, he calmly looked at Zhang Deqin and softly said, Chief Zhang, I don't know whether the bet between us is valid or not. Chief Long, you can rest assured. Since you have won the bet, the development rights of Walled Hill Village are naturally yours. In addition, We will offer you 10% of the Sky Street Commercial City's shares in 10 days. Zhang Deqin pursed her lips and pondered for a moment. Then, she immediately revealed a smile and generously admitted her defeat. Although the Zhang family had a strong power in the Shuangqing province, the Long family's power was also not bad. Moreover, the Long family was a rising star with a stronger potential. If the Zhang family wanted to deal with the Long family, then they would definitely suffer a great loss. In fact, when the family's business had developed to a certain stage, they would have formed a mutually intertwined chain of interests. It was simply impossible to have a bloody fight, and they could only choose to fight within the rules. This was also the reason why Zhang Deqin didn't use any underhanded means when she wanted to obtain the development rights of Walled Hill Village. Instead, she chose to fight with Long Jingyu in an extremely above-board way. Since it was a fight, naturally, there must be a bet. The Long family's bet was to withdraw from the competition for the development rights of Walled Hill Village, while the Zhang family's bet was to give up 10% of the Sky Street Commercial City's shares. This Long first thanks Chief Zhang on behalf of my father. Hearing Zhang Deqin's words, Long Jingyu subconsciously felt relieved. Although the Zhang family was the Sky Street Commercial City's major shareholder, but the Zhang family only held 35% of the Sky Street Commercial City's shares. The rest of the shares were in the hands of several other shareholders. The Long family built the Sky Street Commercial City in order to plan it as a food and beverage city. However, they didn't have enough funds at that time, so they brought in too many shareholders. As a result, the Long family's handling of matters was restricted everywhere, and the overall layout of the Sky Street Commercial City was still not completed. Now, with the transfer of 10% of the Zhang family's shares, although the Long family still couldn't complete the control of the Sky Street Commercial City, but the Long family's speaking power in the Sky Street Commercial City had undoubtedly increased a lot. As long as the Long family released this news, they could easily buy the shares of the other small shareholders. You're welcome. Chief Long should thank himself for inviting such a good master, Zhang Deqin said perfunctorily. Then, her eyes immediately fell on Tan Xiao with a complex expression. As for Zhang Yongjin, Hu Wanjun and Schwerenfei, the moment the dice cup was opened, they were dumbfounded. In the eyes of these three people, Tan Xiao was just a vulgar and barbaric country bumpkin. Apart from having brute force, he didn't have anything else. But after falling in the hands of Tan Xiao again and again, they found that it wasn't the case at all. Especially after Tan Xiao showed his powerful gambling skills, their minds swayed, and they couldn't recover for a long time. The three people originally planned to find someone to investigate Tan Xiao's identity after today, and then slowly deal with Tan Xiao. But when Tan Xiao successfully helped the Long family win the gambling game, they knew that they couldn't easily retaliate against Tan Xiao. Although Long Jingyu looked kind on the surface and didn't seem to have any temper, Zhang Yongjin, Hu Wanjun, and Schwerenfei were very clear that in front of Long Jingyu, who was once the #1 playboy in Shuangqing province, they were nothing. However, Long Jingyu was the kind of person who valued friendship and righteousness. Since Tan Xiao helped Long Jingyu so much, it was impossible for Long Jingyu to watch Tan Xiao being bullied and be indifferent. Chapter 45. It could be said that Zhang Deqin's group came in high spirits, but returned in disappointment. Originally, they were determined to win Walled Hill Village. In fact, after Jiaruidao came out of the mountain, no one thought that Zhang Deqin would lose. Others didn't think so, and Zhang Deqin herself was 100 times more confident. In the previous public opinion campaign, the alliance led by the Zhang family had an absolute advantage, whereas the Long family was gloomy as they wailed in grief. But Zhang Deqin had never dreamed that she would lose this bet, and lose in such an inexplicable way. Brother Tang, thank you very much. If not for you, our Long family would have suffered a setback. Moreover, it would have been a big setback. After Zhang Deqin's group left, the calm and tranquil expression on Long Jingyu's face instantly disappeared, and was replaced by excitement. He grabbed Tan Xiao's hand and shook it vigorously. Seeing Long Jingyu suddenly changing his face in front of him, His facial muscles couldn't help but twitch fiercely. He was a bit uncomfortable for a while. Brother Long is too polite. To tell you the truth, the reason why I agreed to help is that I have a request. After pondering for a moment, Tan Xiao spoke in a soft voice. Hey, that's nothing. Do you know how much Walled Hill Village's development value is? Do you know how much 10% of the Sky Street Commercial City's shares are worth? Both of them are worth countless millions. Moreover, some things can't be bought with money. Just as Tan Xiao's voice faded, Long Jingyu shook his head and refuted. Upon hearing Long Jingyu's words, Tan Xiao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If it wasn't for Long Jingyu's skillful performance in the fight with Zhang Deqin, Tan Xiao would have suspected that the person standing in front of him was a fool. He hadn't even opened his mouth to speak his conditions, yet Long Jingyu had already told him the value of Walled Hill Village and the Sky Street Commercial City. Wasn't this forcing him to ask for a sky-high price? Fortunately, Tan Xiao had been living in the immortal world for more than 10,000 years, and his temperament had long been cultivated to be very calm and steady. Therefore, even if Long Jingyu exaggerated the value of Walled Hill Village and Sky Street Merchant City, he was still indifferent and didn't have any greedy thoughts in his heart. Brother Tang, the reason why I offered 1 million yuan before was to recruit a gambling expert, was because I knew that after Jia Ruidao promised to help Zhang Deqin, no matter how high my offer was, no one would dare to help me. In fact, 1 million yuan is far from enough for a gambling expert. Tang Xiao said with a smile. Do you know the price that Zhang Deqin gave to Jia Ruidao? 5 million. Regardless of winning or losing, it's still 5 million. There's no room for bargaining. This time, Zhang Deqin and the others have suffered a double loss. It's a terrible loss. Brother Tang, since you can win against Jia Ruidao, then your price certainly can't be lower than his. Therefore, I will also give you a 5 million yuan check. As for the other condition, as long as my Long family can do it, I won't be stingy. Not waiting for Tan Xiao to speak, Long Jingyu had already raised the reward. Moreover, he had an expression that said, if you dare to refuse, then I will fight with you. Seeing Long Jingyu's heroic and lofty appearance, Tan Xiao's mind was in a trance, as if he was looking at himself in the immortal world. Brother Long doesn't need to be so polite. I still insist on the 1 million yuan reward, even if I don't want the 1 million yuan reward, because I want a piece of land on the hilltop of Walled Hill Village. Tan Xiao stared at Long Jingyu for a moment and spoke in a deep voice. The piece of land doesn't need to be too big, about 1,000 square meters will do. Brother Tang wants a piece of land on Walled Hill Village? Long Jingyu obviously didn't expect that Tan Xiao would put forward such a request. He couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment, because he couldn't figure out why Tan Xiao wanted a piece of land on Walled Hill Village. Brother Tang, is it convenient for you to tell me why you want a piece of land on Walled Hill Village? On the other side of Walled Hill Village is Yuzhou Ridge. Yuzhou Ridge is my hometown. Standing on the hilltop of Walled Hill Village, you can have a panoramic view of Yuzhou Ridge. If I build a courtyard there and plant 2 pieces of land, my mom will definitely be very happy. Tan Xiao hesitated for a moment. He didn't speak about the matter of the spiritual vein, but casually made up a reason. However, Tan Xiao's words weren't without a target. He knew that although his mother accompanied him to Star City to study, but in fact, she was very homesick. Although Walled Hill Village was a distance away from Yuzhou Ridge, but because of the high altitude of Walled Hill Village, standing on the hilltop of Walled Hill Village, one could see the whole picture of Yuzhou Ridge from afar. If one were to use a telescope, they would be able to see it even more clearly. So Brother Tang wants to build a manor. Just leave this matter to our Long's dining hall. We will definitely help you build a beautiful manor. I guarantee that you and Auntie will be satisfied. After listening to Tan Xiao's words, Long Jingyu subconsciously breathed a sigh of relief. Because Long Jingyu regarded Walled Hill Village as an extremely important piece of land, he had learned a profound lesson from the Tianjia commercial city. Therefore, regarding the development of Walled Hill Village, he already had an overall plan. With the current strength of the Long family, they were fully capable of independently completing the overall plan of Walled Hill Village. If Tan Xiu wanted to do another project in Walled Hill Village, and that project would conflict with the overall plan of the Long's dining hall, Long Jingyu would certainly feel very embarrassed. However, he would still try his best to satisfy Tan Xiu's request. After all, the development rights of Walled Hill Village was won by Tan Xiu, which Long Jingyu also agreed to. Since Tan Xiu's request, and the overall plan of the Long's dining hall, didn't have any conflict, the stone in Long Jingyu's heart naturally fell to the ground. Hearing that Long Jingyu had agreed to his request, Tan Xiu was also happy. Under the hospitality of the two brothers, Long Jingyu and Long Zhenglin, Tan Xiu visited the Long's dining hall and had a hearty meal before they went to Walled Hill Village together. When the two brothers, Long Jingyu and Long Zhenglin, took Tan Xiu to Walled Hill Village, they also directly brought the designer along. After arriving at the hilltop, Tan Xiu directly found the location of the spiritual vein and told them about the area he wanted. The two brothers, Long Jingyu and Long Zhenglin, stood on the hilltop and looked in the direction of Yuzhou Ridge. They found that they could really see the scenery of Yuzhou Ridge at a glance. Therefore, they thoroughly believed Tan Xiu's words. Although the flowers and trees on the wasteland with the spiritual vein, as the center, were particularly lush, the two brothers didn't find any abnormalities. Since Walled Hill Village was originally a virgin forest with overgrown weeds, even if the flowers and trees around the location of the spiritual vein were slightly lush, they still wouldn't be able to sense it. Brother Tang, I've inspected Walled Hill Village more than 10 times and almost turned it over. I've also passed by this place several times, but I've never found this place to be good. Now that you've chosen it, why do I feel that this place is the most beautiful place on the mountain? Long Jingyu retracted his gaze and said half jokingly and half seriously. Upon hearing it, Tan Xiu's pupil shrunk as he immediately said with a smile, "Didn't the ancients say that the unobtainable is always the best?" What Brother Tang said is extremely true. I'm being petty. Hearing Tan Xiu's explanation, Long Jingyu couldn't help but burst into laughter. He no longer entangled himself with it, and let the designer start measuring the land and drawing the design. When Long Jingyu asked Tan Xiu what he wanted the courtyard to look like, a heavenly paradise in the immortal world suddenly appeared in Tan Xiu's mind. Almost unconsciously, Tan Xiu picked up the designer's pen and started to draw on the A4 paper. In the beginning, the designer didn't think much of it. He thought that a high school student couldn't possibly understand design, nor could he draw anything good. But when the outline of the building slowly emerged on the paper, the designer's eyes instantly widened. Chapter 46. Long Jingyu finally gave Tan Xiu a bank card with 1 million yuan in cash. He originally wanted to give Tan Xiu 5 million yuan as a reward, but after Tan Xiu asked for the spiritual vein in Walled Hill Village, he didn't want more money from Long Jingyu. However, Long Jingyu repeatedly promised that he would seriously build Tan Xiu's heavenly palace and make it the most beautiful scenery in Walled Hill Village, as well as the landmark of Walled Hill Village. Tan Xiu hesitated for a moment before he finally agreed to Long Jingyu's request. On one hand, Tan Xiu missed the heavenly paradise in the immortal world, and he wanted to restore it. On the other hand, Long Jingyu was completely attracted by Tan Xiu's heavenly palace. He had the idea of turning the entire Walled Hill Village into a heavenly court, and wanted to make Tan Xiu's heavenly palace the core of Walled Hill Village. This was a matter that benefited both himself and others, so Tan Xiu naturally wouldn't refuse. After going down the mountain, Tan Xiu went to the real estate agent. Tan Xiu wanted to temper his body, but naturally, he couldn't do it in his own home, nor in the wilderness. Although Walled Hill Village was a good choice, but there were likely to be other demonic beasts there, and Tan Xiu didn't want to be attacked by demonic beasts while he was in seclusion cultivation. Therefore, Tan Xiu wanted to find a quiet and remote place with a perfect security system to temper his body and cultivate. When Tan Xiu stated his requirements for the house, the real estate agent looked at Tan Xiu with a strange expression. "Mr. Tang, it's easy to find a quiet and remote community, but you have such high requirements for the community's security, which is a bit difficult to find. Only those luxurious upscale communities, or luxurious villas, would have security to the extreme. It's impossible for ordinary communities to have such a good security system. It seems that there's only one community in the entire Star City that has all the three conditions you mentioned. But that community's rental fee is particularly high, and the identity control is also very strict. The agent glanced at Tan Xiu's clothes and spoke hesitantly. What do you mean by strict identity control? Seeing his agent's troubled look, Tan Xiu was stunned. Because the people living in this district are either rich or respectable. The residents of this district seem to have formed an unspoken rule. That is, ordinary people are not allowed to move in unless the residents of this district vouch for them. Only outsiders can move in. The agent hesitated for a moment before softly explaining. Tan Xiu was speechless after hearing his agent's explanation. Tan Xiu did not continue to talk to his agent. Instead, he took out his mobile phone and directly dialed Long Zhonglin's number. Boss, we've only left for a short while, and you're already missing me. I know you love me. On the other end of the phone, Long Zhonglin was still immersed in the joy of obtaining Walled Hill Village, as he laughed and joked. Upon hearing this, Tan Xiu felt a chill in his heart as he snappily cursed. Then, he asked if the other party knew the residents of Southgate Town. You want to rent a house in Southgate Town? Hey, why didn't you say so earlier? Don't you know that Southgate Town was developed by my family? After listening to Tan Xiu's words, Long Zhonglin exclaimed from the other end of the phone. In the next moment, another person spoke on the other end. Brother Tang, the houses in Southgate Town have long been sold out. It's basically not rented out. But my friend bought a house in Southgate Town in the early years. After he finished the renovation, he found that the house was near the mountain, and the lighting was very poor. So he never moved in. If you want it, I'll give it to you directly. Either you sell it to me according to the market price, or I'll find another place. Choose one of the two. Seeing that Long Jingyu wanted to stuff things into his hands, Tan Xiu felt a headache as he refused without hesitation. Hey brother Tang, it's not that I want to criticize you, but you're too serious. You won't have any friends in the future. Although the house is big, but the lighting is too poor. It simply can't be sold at a high price. Otherwise, my friend would have sold it long ago, and wouldn't have been vacant for so many years. Well, if you really want to buy it, 1 million yuan will do. I'll immediately send the key to you. On the other end of the phone, Long Jingyu simply didn't give Tan Xiu the opportunity to speak, and directly finalized the matter. When Tan Xiu hung up the phone with a forced smile, he found that the agent was looking at him with a sluggish expression. He froze for a moment before he understood what was going on. The other party had most likely heard the content of his conversation with Long Jingyu. Mr. Tang, I'm sorry. I didn't know that you're Chief Long's friend. I offended you a moment ago. The agent awkwardly smiled at Tan Xiu as he hurriedly apologized. Is Chief Long very famous in Star City? Tan Xiu asked with a puzzled expression. Mr. Tang, it's estimated that 9 out of 10 girls in Star City know Chief Long. Don't you think he's famous? Tang Rong said with a flushed face. Tan Xiu couldn't help but be stunned when he heard this. Although Long Jingyu was a bit handsome, but he wasn't handsome to the point where he could shock the world and make the gods cry. Moreover, Long Jingyu was a businessman, not a star. How could he be so famous in Star City? However, Tan Xiu didn't ask any more questions. He turned around and left the real estate agent, heading towards the appointed place with Long Jingyu. A few minutes later, Long Zhonglin personally delivered the key and took away his ID card. When Tang Xiu handed over his bank card to Long Zhonglin refused to accept it. Eldest brother, you can't enter Southgate Town just because you have a house key. I suggest you use this 1 million to dress yourself up from top to bottom. If you go to Southgate Town dressed like this, I'm 100% sure that you will be stopped outside by the security guards. Before leaving, Long Zhonglin said with a ruminating smile. Tan Xiu smiled and didn't put Long Zhonglin's words in his heart. Almost at the same moment when Long Zhonglin turned around, Tan Xiu stuffed the bank card with 1 million in cash into Long Zhonglin's pocket. Half an hour later, Tan Xiu arrived at the entrance of Southgate Town. Almost as Tan Xiu arrived at the entrance of the community, more than a dozen security guards excitedly swarmed him. Seeing a group of security guards aggressively rushing towards him, Tan Xiu was so scared that he almost ran away. His face revealed an extremely embarrassed expression. Tan Xiu was a bit regretful that he didn't listen to Long Zhonglin's words and dress himself up. Good afternoon, Mr. Tang. I'm Long Xiuyao, the property manager of Southgate Town. I'm very happy to serve you. Mr. Long asked me to take you to the Yanning courtyard. Please come with me. The tall girl, who was the leader, deeply bowed to Tan Xiu with a sweet smile hanging on her face as she greeted him in a crisp voice. Upon hearing Long Xiuyao's words, Tan Xiu, who was about to explain, couldn't help but be stunned. He immediately understood that he had been played by Long Jingyu and Long Zhenglin brothers. Long Jingyu and Long Zhenglin brothers had obviously figured out his character. They knew that it was impossible for him to spend so much time and money to dress himself up. Therefore, they deliberately put on such a play in order to scare him. Although he was cursing a few times in his heart, a charming smile appeared on Tan Xiu's face. He politely said thank you, and then followed behind Long Xiuyao and the group of security guards. After entering the Southgate Town community, Tan Xiu found himself as if he had entered another world. Inside the residential area, the water was still and deep, and the flowers were blooming. It was completely different from the hustle and bustle outside the residential area. Moreover, there was a pavilion every 3 steps and a sentry post every 5 steps. Almost every sentry post had a security guard standing in a military posture. Seeing the passers-by, they would give a standard military salute. If he hadn't confirmed that he had entered a luxurious villa area, Tan Xiu would have suspected that he had entered a military compound. After passing through a patch of flowers and grass, Tan Xiu was led by Long Xiuyao to the deepest part of the community. There, he saw a single villa stuck on the cliff. The moment Tan Xiu saw the villa, he knew that he had been deceived. Although the villa was backed by a mountain, it was located on the sunny side. The lighting was obviously very good. Moreover, the top of the villa was surrounded by trees, giving it a different kind of charm. The other villas in the community simply couldn't be compared to it. Mr. Tang, this is my business card. If you need anything, feel free to call me at any time. I hope you can live comfortably in the community. Providing you with logistical support is our biggest responsibility. Clearly seeing Tan Xiu's reaction after seeing the villa, Long Xiuyao promptly handed over a business card and then quietly left with a group of security guards. At this time, Tan Xiu's mind was completely focused on the villa. After hurriedly saying goodbye to Long Xiuyao, he couldn't wait to get into the villa. After entering the villa, Tan Xiu knew that he had been deceived again. The villa had a total of 3 floors. Because it was built on the mountain, each floor had its own scenery. After entering the gate, there was a cobblestone path. On both sides of the path was a row of stone benches. The stone benches were arranged with different shapes of flowers and trees, which were very pleasing to the eye. The high entrance hall, and the imposing door, the round arched windows and the cornerstone masonry, were full of grace and luxury. The continuous arches and corridors were elegant and exquisite, and there was no lack of comfort. The decoration of the villa inherited the essence of traditional Chinese architecture, maintaining the traditional architecture's unique artistic style of ancient elegance, simplicity, and magnificence. It also took nature as a refuge and advocated Confucianism. It contained both Taoism and Buddhism. It contained both hidden and elegant, abstruse and elegant, both classical and cheerful, the natural building materials, and the climbing vines set off each other. It was classic but not fashionable. Almost at first glance, Tan Xiu deeply fell in love with this villa. Not counting the value of the villa itself, it is estimated that the villa's decoration alone would cost more than 1,000,000 yuan. I owe a big favor. When Tan Xiu was ready to take out his mobile phone and ask Long Jingyu the real price of the villa, he found that Long Jingyu had actually turned off his phone. Tan Xiu knew that Long Jingyu was hiding from him. It was impossible for him to return this villa. It seems that I can only slowly repay this favor. Tan Xiu was originally reluctant to return the villa. Seeing that Long Jingyu had turned off his phone, his heart was no longer entangled. If it were another person who suddenly received such a huge amount of wealth, they would certainly be at a loss. However, Tan Xiu was almost the richest man in the immortal world in his previous life, and he had the confidence to repay the Long family's favor. Therefore, Tan Xiu quickly and indifferently accepted the fact that Long Jingyu had gifted him a villa. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.